welcome my guest for today, Horatius the Dwarf.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Hello, hello. Good to see you, Horatius. And yes, I'm so happy to see that transition from post-open pre-guest to the main screen has a tendency to chug, or rather had a tendency to chug a little bit on my old machine, but this one, that was smooth as silk, so that makes me very happy because VTuber Talk doesn't have a ton of, high-tech fancy things that required a lot of, power, and that's why it's been all right to just have that, but that's already just a tiny little quality of life thing that I'm very happy to see. I'm very happy to have you here. So welcome on in, Horatius. I'm sure that folks who are watching probably have an idea of who you are, but for anyone who might not be familiar, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Horatius the Dwarf. Those who know me better might know my proper name of Horatius Silverstone. I am a Dwarf EN VTuber, and when I'm not playing Dwarven video games, I'm playing non-Dwarven games as dwarvenly as I can. And when I'm not doing those things, I'm a mental health professional in the real world. So I like to bring my understanding of sociology, psychology, and mental health to the streaming space. So we do lots of discussions talking about mental health topics and psychological topics, including a once-a-month lecture that I've sort of dubbed the psychology edutainment lecture, where I sort of give people a psychology 101, like college course level understanding of a topic, and then we do Q&A and stuff like that. I also do like little psychology open houses, which are just sort of more of a relaxed Q&A. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Thanks for having me on again. I'm really excited.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. Now, you mentioned playing dwarf games and non-dwarf games as dwarvenly as possible. I remember you mentioning that you don't play Dwarf Fortress because you don't feel that that's a particular game that is suited for streaming, at least for not for your style. So I am curious, what other dwarf games are there? Because I can't think of too many off the top of my head, admittedly.
Excuse me, Mr. VTuber Talk. We discussed we would not be bringing up Dwarf Fortress, and that's your first question. This has been a really awesome opportunity. Thank you for having me on. But I'm gonna
It's a good show, everyone. Good night. Bye-bye.
Wrap it up. No, yeah, no. There's a fair bit of dwarf games out there. Some of which people might be aware of. Some very popular ones, such as Deep Rock Galactic, is a time-honored favorite of mine. We have I just Google Steam searched dwarf in my listing. There we got Dwarf Journey, which is a cute little 2D platformer. Dwarf Heim, which is a bit of a dead in the water game, but it's like an RTS type of deal. The Dwarves, which is actually a book series that was made into a video game. Pretty good. Dwarf is a tower defense game that I genuinely recommend a whole bunch. Very, very good game. Yeah, there's a handful of dwarf games out there if you go looking for them. Although many of them don't have the word dwarf in them, they're just like dwarf themed or have dwarves in them.
And of course, you're going to have a lot of just standard fantasy games that have dwarf as a playable race. That, like you said, we hadn't planned to necessarily go down this particular rabbit hole, but it's been a while. Rather, I hadn't heard that particular intro of yours mentioning the dwarven games, non-dwarven games. So I was like, oh yeah, I can't think of too many, but I forget if you are into MMOs at all.
So I have a consistently unhealthy relationship with MMOs, and I mean that in a somewhat playful manner. So I did my dime of World of Warcraft. I played EverQuest way back in the day. I've dipped my toes into many other MMOs over the years. And when the opportunity arises to play a dwarf, I tend to play a dwarf. Although secret shame, I suppose, I'm a Horde true at heart. But played a Tauren Druid healer specifically for years and years and years.
Awesome. Yeah. For myself, I've never really been into MMOs, and that's, I think, largely a function of just not having a play group for them. That most of my friends growing up were not into MMOs, and that's such an integral part for the MMO experience, especially
100%.
if you are younger, of being able to go in with a friend group to play, to raid with, and all those things. So it's not that I don't think I would have enjoyed them or that I couldn't have gotten into them just because they aren't my style, but that I didn't necessarily have, the surroundings to enable it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I touched WoW, for example. I touched it right when it was still coming out, like it was still like early vanilla era. And then I came back to it when I had people to play with. And many of the other games many of the other MMOs, like I got into it because I had friends that played it and were like, hey, we need a healer, or hey, we need a tank, or whatever it was. So that's definitely, I think, a pretty somewhat universal, if not entirely universal, story for MMO players. But I don't really play MMOs very much anymore because I tend to get a bit over invested. I tend to sort of give more time than I should. It's never been to the point where like my life becomes dysfunctional due to that, thankfully. But like I'll say it this way: I definitely failed a college course or two because I misappropriated my time management, thanks to raid times and stuff like that.
Well, at the very least, that you were able to acknowledge and realize, okay, this is becoming a problem, and even if it, failing college course is not something that you ever want to see happen, but it isn't a cataclysmic life event, and that you're able to realize, all right, this was a stumble here, and take that as your indicator of, all right, gonna step back a little bit, reevaluate, and find that healthy balance for you before things spiraled into something that could have been cataclysmic. So that's still really good to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to learn from those sidesteps and fumbles and mistakes.
Yeah, they happen.
Hmm?
And I'm sure that there's still probably a lot of really fun, treasured memories in their own right. That obviously, the footnote of, by the way, failed a college course here isn't the best part, but at the same time, you're generally getting into that state because you are having a good time. That's kind of what college is for. That, get messy, make mistakes, have fun, make some memories.
Mm-hmm.
A failed course, that's fine. It happens.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now, I know nowadays some of the games that you're a bit more into are survival games. And one that you mentioned to me in particular is The Long Dark.
Yes. I have a bit of a tradition on the channel. So I work in a school setting, and have for, it's actually really funny, my entire time in higher education. Ever since my youth, I knew I wanted to work in psychology or in mental health in some degree or another. And I spent my whole life up till working in the field more recently, and I was like, I'm never gonna work with kids. Don't want to work with kids. Heck, working with kids. And I have done nothing but work with kids for 5-7 years. Like,
Oops.
So like, one of the benefits though is that when we get a snow day, then I get the snow day too. So a bit of a tradition on my channel is if I get a snow day, then suddenly we're gonna have a morning stream out of nowhere, and it's always The Long Dark.
Very flavorful. I appreciate
absolutely. That. Thank you. For those of you who might not be familiar, The Long Dark is a very honest, very realistic survival game, and I say that in like with no small amount of hesitation because people get very up in arms about that sort of thing. But like, you don't have a hunger meter; you have your active calories. You can sprain your ankle by running down a slope. Your temperature is a huge factor because it takes place in the like rural Canada during a massive snowstorm with like some sort of EMP shenanigans that's knocked out electricity. So you can't just like shack up in a house and turn the generator on. Like, that's not available. So if you want to heat yourself or heat your living space, you gotta go get firewood, or gotta do this. If you want to make a new pair of boots, you gotta go find a rabbit and then turn that rabbit into hide, and then you have to tan the hide. Like, I don't know, it's a nice level of intimacy with actual surviving skills at play. Yeah. Although again, the game very openly says what you learn in this game is not going to keep you alive.
Disclaimer: do not use in real life. That
right.
I appreciate that there is a level of granularity to the procedure of everything, and that you do need to have these details, but also good call from the developers of saying, by the by, don't go out there into the cold wilderness and think that this is going to mean that you were qualified to survive.
Absolutely.
Now,
very responsible.
And it's funny that you mentioned that you're in education mental health there. So my mother actually was a teacher for many, many, many years, taught pretty much everything K through 12 at some point. Mental health was not her area of expertise, but I can very much understand and identify with, she loves snow days as well. And that, she always, to this day, makes the comments of whenever we get a lot of rain in the winter of just, oh, this would have been such a great snow, or this would have made for, probably a bunch of snow days. And it was very fun having my mom be along with my siblings and I of just, hoping and waiting. All right, are they going to call school for the day whenever we had snow? And I like that you're then able to spin that off. into something, like I said, it's very flavorful for your channel, but then also hopping back into the actual job itself that, like you mentioned, you're a mental health professional, and obviously working with kids in schools, that's another very specific type of mental health, because
Oh yeah.
working with kids and young adults is going to be different than working with adults. And I do find it interesting that you mentioned that you did not intend to work with kids necessarily. That I
No.
am very much the same. That I knew I did not want to follow in my mother's footsteps as a teacher, because
Mhm.
I have younger nieces and nephews at this point in time, and I'm fine working with kids in a short span of time, or that if there's a family gathering, sure, whatever, that's fine. I have no interest whatsoever of working with kids, even teenagers. I would not want to be an elementary, middle, or high school teacher. If I were to get into education, maybe college,
Mm.
maybe, but even then, it's a bit iffy. But uh, if you are comfortable sort of explaining the history there, how do you sort of fall into educational work? Is that just that you had the interest in psychology and that there happened to be an opening there for you to use that knowledge, or is there something a bit more complex involved?
The big thing is that availability of work.
Hmm.
So if you are in the mental health field and you want to do clinical work, not research per se, then you can either shack up with a company that is a private contractor that like works with a clientele base, or they have a location that they have their clients come to, or maybe you can attach yourself to a business that works with a government. For example, I did what's called intensive in-home with a company for a while, and all of the caseloads that came to this company were court ordered. So like, kid gets in trouble with the law, uh, judgment comes down and says, listen, this kid's got to go to juvie or whatever else, unless they receive this kind of intensive in-home help for this amount of time, and there's a measurable improvement with air quotes of their behavior over the course of that period, in which case they can continue to resume regular life. So like that company I worked with there sort of came in at that point. So like at that job, for example, even though the majority of the clientele base were children, and adolescents and teenagers as well, like I did work with like a 22-year-old, which like in all traditional senses of legality, that is not a child, but still very young, especially to me. But most of my school-based work and this job that I'm currently in is middle school based, because there's a big burnout rate for working in schools for reasons that I'm sure you can imagine.
Yeah.
And so like the position that I currently hold has a burnout rate of I think like 200-300%. So like every 4 months they sort of expect the position to rotate,
Hmm.
which is terrible.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I've been there for a year and a half now, so
Hey,
doing pretty good.
congratulations. That
Thanks.
already means that you are, like you said, statistically bucking the trend there and being able to give, especially for the kids, that it can't be any easier for them that if they see the person that is supposed to be helping them
Mhm.
rotate and have to reacclimate, and that even if they are perfectly capable for professionals, that being able to get to know your patients in that
Mhm.
sense, or just understanding, all right, how does stuff at this school work? How does stuff at this company work? That even the
Right.
most capable and seasoned folks are going to have that acclimation period, and that for you to be something of consistency where they might not have had it before is a really big thing, I can imagine.
It is and it isn't. So I work at a particular school where the entire student body are kids with additional needs. Like it's
Mm,
all of the kids there. The overwhelming majority of them have some manner of autism diagnosis. So we work with a lot of autistic children. And what's funny about what you've commented there is because yes, you're absolutely correct. Having a consistent pool of people can be very, very helpful for these children, especially these children. However, it's really important that for children like this, that they have they do have different people come into their life, and that they are repeatedly building relationships with new people on a regular basis. Because what is relatively common, and incredibly unfortunately so, is that these types of children will form relationships and then not continue to mature their skill set to continue to make new relationships. So they end up
That's interesting.
they essentially
I-
cut off the list of like no more friends, and then they essentially are kneecapping themselves from getting additional support groups, and that can be really challenging later on to sort of make them have to continue to invite
that
people
just
into their life.
the sort of the forced introduction of new relationships in whether it be new teachers or new
Mhm.
support staff that as you're explaining this, that actually does make a lot of sense that it sort of nudges them along in terms of their relationship understanding and growth and just
Yeah.
maturation in that sense of saying, all right, every couple months you have to meet someone new, whether you like it or not. And
Mhm.
it is interesting that of all patient sets, that is the one where it might actually usually be a good one. And fortunately, I'm sure that there's a lot of other opportunities for that, and that I certainly don't wish you to end up being forced out of your job for that.
Well, what would more likely happen, and this has happened, and I've witnessed it happen, is rather than like no one gets fired, right, to facilitate that transition,
They might
but
rotate or something.
yes. So like we'll rotate caseloads, or rotate which classrooms you work in or work with most specifically. So like that
Mm,
will happen if we feel like they need to incorporate new relationships. But that's not, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to frame that, that is not a common occurrence due to just the natural flow of people in and out of the business.
mm. Also, I'm not sure if chat's here on their end. I feel like I'm hearing a bit of fluctuation of volume on your end. That sometimes you're getting a little bit louder, sometimes a little bit softer. It's never too
Hmm.
extreme either way. I'm not sure if
Interesting.
you're leaning in and out a bit towards your mic at all, or maybe it's something on my end.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a gesticulator. So I do have a lot of bodily movement. So I'm sure, like, if I'm doing this and talking in this direction, I'm not facing my microphone anymore. Whereas right now I'm facing my microphone. So if it's anything like that, then that's
Okay,
probably
yeah.
to blame. My apologies.
No, you're all good. I just wanted to, hey, like I said, it's a new machine. I want to make sure that nothing's going totally haywire. That
Yeah.
you're staying within what I would call very reasonable bounds. But like I said, I wanted to make sure that if there was anything I needed to adjust, that I did.
Mhm.
But we are all good.
Great.
Um, Hopping back a little bit to the Long Dark, that I found the particular topic of you mentioning that you use it as snow days and that you are a teacher, and having my own sort of personal experience there.
Mhm.
But I feel like I sort of cut off the dark talk. Um, was there something about the game that really appealed to you? Was it just the fact that it had this more granular approach to things than most survival games? Was it something about the setting that what really grabbed you about it?
It has a one of the things that the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild gets a lot of praise for is its audio design.
Mm.
Um, are you familiar with that game much at all?
Oh yes.
So when you're just sort of adventuring, you're just on horseback or on foot or whatever, and you're just sort of transitioning from open space to open space or from location to location, the music's very gentle, present, but very gentle. Like it's a single or a pair of like string instruments or wind instruments, just sort of providing some gentle ambience. But other than that, it's generally quite quiet when it can be. And The Long Dark has that similar approach to sound design, which was initially something that that drew me in. It has a charming cell shaded graphical look to it, which I also thought was really really clever. Um, and it doesn't shy away. So I'm quite the outdoorsman. I like to spend a lot of time outside when I can, um, especially when it's not single degrees out, but a single digit degrees out like it is right now. But I love to be outside, and so there's a lot of genuine honest representation of nature and its sort of lull and its beauty in The Long Dark that I find incredibly enrapturing. And so when it's too cold to go out and be amongst the weather myself, because I don't have the hard weather gear for it, I can sort of play pretend and experience all of the wonders of nature from the coziness of my home.
Yeah, that uh Breath of the Wild is one that I got too late because I'm a huge Legend of Zelda fan, but I
Mhm.
hadn't picked up a Switch early on because they were pretty tough to find.
Yeah.
Um, but when I finally got one, it actually wound up being right at about no, it was in March 2020, specifically because I was transitioning to work from home and things were looking not so stellar that I went out of my way. And one of the things that I did, like over the weekend between when I was going from work at office to work at home and we didn't know when we'd be going back, that I went to the store and was like, all right, I'm gonna buy a couple of games because it seems like I'm gonna have some time on my hands. And that was when I finally bought Breath of the Wild, which puts me there like a year late. But
Mhm.
just I fell into that game in a way that I don't frequently fall into games, and it was such a joy to play through that. Of just
Yeah.
the sound design, like you said, immaculate. It gets a lot of praise for a lot of its design with very good reason. The hype is very real on that one. Um, just and when it comes to the Arctic areas in particular, that the the minimalism of everything is even more stark than when you have minimalism when you're walking through a field or going through some of the mines or other areas. That
Mhm.
the sound design just like when you are in snow, sound is dampened. That
Mhm.
sound literally does not bounce around as much because it gets absorbed by the snow, so it's just quieter, and you have that crunch of your feet and the snow under it, and just the subtle howl of wind, and it's like you said, this beautiful, calm, and at the same time eerie type of sense, especially when you get to the nighttime cycles.
Yeah, I don't know how often I've talked about this on stream, but this is a little super deep fact about me. Um, my favorite thing about winter weather and like heavy winter weather, um, is there's a very particular moment, and you can find this in like a calm Sunday morning without heavy weather, but there's something that really is important to me, and it's these moments of calm because I live in a city. I've lived near and in cities my whole life, but just this moment where, especially after a heavy snowstorm, where you go out of your front door and it's silent, and it
Mm.
doesn't it doesn't get silent there, but it is, and there's something mystical about that to me. um and so in the snowy areas of Breath of the Wild, in the Long Dark, in other games that capture the brilliance of silence, it's so, I don't know, to me it's the tranquility of that is blissfully calming, and so I love
Yeah,
it.
that I know. Obviously, snow and winter weather circumstantially, depending on what it is, can be very harrowing, very difficult. And I know
Mhm.
a lot of folks over the past week, in particular, with it getting pretty wintry in certain parts of the United States during holiday travel season, has been very stressful. And I know a couple folks actually had to be evacuated in certain areas of the
Yep.
country, that it got bad. But
Yeah.
if you are in an area that is fortunate enough to have winter weather that is more moderate, that it can just be this, like you said, this blissful, beautiful tranquility of, you know, it's snowing. And even if it's snowing pretty hard, that because people are staying inside and not driving around, that things come to a stop and that it is unnaturally quiet, regardless of where you are. And that, you know, whether you're just poking your head outside, or sometimes I would take my dog for a walk because, even if there's snow, they still need to be walked.
Yep.
Um, and just how quiet it is, the way sounds sound from, like I mentioned, your feet under you to your own breathing.
Mhm.
And it is this very unique type of beautiful that, as long as it's not in the extreme where, all right, you need to stay in place, stay sheltered, or be evacuated because there is actual danger, that
Right.
in moderation, winter weather is just the most beautiful thing.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And certainly for kids, the memories of building snow people, the
Mhm.
snowball fights, sledding. That sledding was huge for me when I was younger. That I would
Mhm.
go out and just wear myself into exhaustion sledding with friends.
Absolutely.
Did you have any favorite snow pastimes when you were younger?
Nothing that you haven't already mentioned. there's one story that I have though, and that's
Oh.
there was a thicket nearby, not terribly close, but not very far away either. That was definitely walkable, and so in a day off, I can't remember if it was like an actual snow day or whatever, but basically it was one of those days where it was snowy and cold and icy enough for the whole world to sort of shut down a little bit. And so I strapped up, I threw on my extras, and I went over to that thicket and I just explored it. I just treated it as if it was a completely foreign place, even though I had been there a dozen times before. But just the way the world looks during the middle of the winter with everything covered with snow it feels alien despite you knowing it. So
Yeah.
that was a fun story, a fun occasion of mine.
Yeah, that I lived in a suburban area, so if you drive a couple miles, that you're in small city. If you were to drive a couple more miles, you'd be in a bigger city.
Mhm.
But just where I was, that it was distinct suburbs, not rural at all, but that there was sort of this forest outlining, dotting the area with a creek running through things, and just a couple parks. That there was one that had this amazing, just it was essentially a bowl of just next to the park. That there was this uneven terrain that I have no idea how it wound up that way. It's just how it was, and that there were no buildings there. There was no power lines or anything else because it was so unnaturally done. And everything around it was good enough that it just seems that they left that area as part of the park technically, but never did anything with it. But when it snowed, that was the place to be. And just it meant that you always went down to the center and people could just, go around this giant area. It's difficult to explain because I don't know a good sense of scale for it, but it was the center of the bowl was basically the size of a house. And just on all sides that you could have a good vantage point to just sled down. And then other times sledding through backyards and accidentally overshooting and winding up in the creek. And that was cold. But again, just, it's a memory at this point of, that and that moment of realizing you cannot stop your momentum. You are about to fall into the creek, and it was very shallow, no danger, but obviously at that type of weather, getting wet is going to be a bad time. And then for the long dark, just being able to have that, I guess, are there any active threats in the long dark, or is it more just you have to survive because the environment itself is so hostile?
There is. So in the long dark, there are wolves. There are deer, which will, like, almost in all situations, deer will not attack you. But like if you go and you take your survival knife and try and shiv it, a 10-point buck will take you down. In that game. But so there's wolves. There's like one or two bears that have very big patrols around multiple areas of the map. So like that's definitely one of the rarer but much more serious threats. And then to appeal to the action gamers out there that did pick the game up, there are a couple of challenge scenarios that you can go into. And one is I forget what it's called, but basically you're actively being hunted by a great big gray, like, grizzly bear.
Ooh.
And it's like you don't have a lot of time. You got to go find stuff to take this thing down, because when it gets to you, it's going to patrol around the building that you're in until you leave, and you can't outrun it. So you got to be ready by the time it finds you. And then there was a cool Halloween event that had like a weird Wendigo-esque spirit chasing you in the like a black fog at night.
Oh, okay. So for all the realistic elements, it's not afraid to get supernatural at times.
Exactly. Which was very, 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 very fun. It only comes around for Halloween. It's a great event.
Okay. I can appreciate that, and it makes it feel all the more special. Like I said, this is a very grounded in reality game, but the whole thing, Halloween, ooh, spooky, and that this is that one time a year that the boundaries between, I guess, reality and spirits are a bit weaker, and I'm sure they have some fun little lore, or maybe even the lack thereof, and it's just, all right, this is a thing, and you have to deal with it.
Right. Yeah. No, but otherwise, very, very grounded experience. With the sole exception that like and they do also disclaimer this, which I appreciate, and that is like if you're in the Arctic wilderness and you see a bear, that bear is not gonna mess with you.
Generally, no.
Yeah, like unless you are terrorizing its children or it, like it does not care. The only time that most species of bears are remotely openly hostile is during spring when they have cubs.
Yep. Or if they are completely starving because they're not able to get through food through frankly easier means, because even bears can understand, all right, they could probably take down a human, but they know that there's their usual rabbits, squirrels, deer, other things that they are more acclimated to and know, all right, I can very easily get food this way.
Right. There's no risk in me killing a small animal, but there is risk in me trying to attack a human. And same thing with wolves. Like wolves will harry you and scare you and try and intimidate you off of their grounds. But especially if you see like a lone wolf, that is not gonna mess with you.
Yeah,
it's got no interest in you whatsoever. So like other than that, and again they do openly disclaim that, which in the game, which is a nice detail. The game is incredibly grounded in realism.
When it comes to survival games in a broader sense, are there any others that you really enjoy, either because they have that grounding in reality, or even ones that are just totally wild that incorporate different survival elements and mechanics?
I definitely love the more fantastical stuff. I think it's good to have the occasional grounded experience. Like Green Hell is one that takes place in the Amazonian jungle that is also quite grounded in realism. Not as much, I would say. It has a little bit more fantastical elements in it, but still very, very much so on that spectrum.
Funny that the second one that you mention is so similar to the Long Dark, but just the inverse of environments.
Yeah, absolutely. Like almost couldn't be more different in that regard. There's one that came out somewhat recently that I've been playing called Star Sand. It takes place in a desert, which is very interesting. Because it's all about like you sort of hopping from oasis in ruins to oasis in ruins, because staying out in the open sun or the open moon even in the middle of a desert is a death sentence for any real amount of time. But then there's more fantastical games that I love a lot. Valheim, love Valheim. It's a great survival game, highly recommend it. Just had a big update recently. And then we have Grounded, which is Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the survival game. Also super, super fun. Lots of cheeky references to the 80s and early 90s, which is fun. Love that. I'm sure if I just literally pulled up my Steam list, I have a whole category called survival game.
Yeah, no, and we're in the middle of the Steam sale right now that I've had a friend refer me to a list of just there's a bunch of stuff on right now. And I know like Sonic Adventure 2, I think, is on sale, which is one of my personal favorite games of all time. Not a survival game by any means, but
sure,
lots of fun stuff out there. Survival games, interestingly enough, are a genre that, for whatever reason, I've never actually gotten super into. Not because I don't think I'd enjoy it, but I guess part of it is my personal game consumption has gone down a significant amount over the past couple years. This is largely a function of me being fortunate enough to work in the games industry, and that when you do something by day, you're a little less likely to seek it out in your free time. But what do you think would be a good introduction to the genre? So I've played games all my life, so I am able to pick up moderate to complex mechanics pretty easily. But in general, is there a place that you would say someone like me might want to start?
I would point you in a couple of different directions, but first I have a question. Do you, because I think there's three main aspects to survival games as a genre, and every single game that considers it a survival game is going to lean in one of these directions more so than the other two, or into two instead of one, etc. And it's base building, exploration, exploration / adventuring may be a better word for it. So like base building, adventuring, and then like automation / survival mechanics. So like a game like The Long Dark, in my opinion, cares a lot about the survival aspect. Like the primary threat to you as a player in that game is the environment. So But also, there's a very big focus in the Long Dark on exploration, adventuring to new locations to go and grab supplies and bring them back to a home base or make another home base. But there's no base building in that game. Like, you can at no point build a repair hammer or whatever and then lay out a blueprint for a house and then build a house. That just doesn't happen in the Long Dark. It's all, I'm going to repurpose this abandoned post office or this abandoned house, or I'm going to repurpose this like neglected car on the side of the road because a snowstorm is coming in and I can't stand out in this for the next 3 hours. I'll die. So I'm going to sit in this car. So that, like, that game does that. But then you have games like Terraria that are more about base building and adventure and very little to no survival aspects. Minecraft is, you know, a classic of the genre and is almost entirely about base building by today's standards, but with mods it could be about any of those three pillars, if you ask me. But I would say you got to figure out which of those three things are the most appealing to you, and then find the game that appeals to that pillar of gameplay loop the most.
That for me, I think adventuring exploration would be number one. That, you know, hopping back to Breath of the Wild, that was one of the things I really loved. Just going anywhere, climbing, and even if I couldn't climb there the first time, figuring out, all right, is there another path to get through this, and just finding every inch of that map and seeing all the different sites and figuring out, all right, what's hidden around here. That is a really compelling thing to me as a player. So that's definitely number one. As for the base building versus the automation, that it'd be tougher to say which is 2 versus 3. I'm not averse to either of them, but adventuring would definitely be the number one.
Then I would honestly recommend Terraria if you've not touched that game before. That game, like, you can base build, but like base building is not a major focus. Like, you can go really ham in that game with building a base, but honestly, slapping down some wooden planks in a frame and enough rooms to let your NPCs move in is all you gotta do. So you know, you can very, very quickly sort of meet that need on a baseline and then focus the entirety of the rest of your gameplay into adventuring, delving down, mining for resources, going and killing different enemies for different types of loot. So that would be my opener recommendation.
Okay, because I've seen Terraria around plenty of times, and it's one that I just haven't had enough contextual knowledge to really understand when I'm watching others stream it. That, but it seems that it's also not so intense. That I see Terraria sort of as a background on a lot of semi just chatting streams, so to speak. That it's one that folks have, at least from what I've seen, been able to play, but it's probably, you know, it's not a big combat based game that you're able to take your time just enough that they're able to sort of split their attention between chat and things. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to check that one out, because I've sort of felt myself getting back into sort of a wave of gaming recently, and that's probably Pokemon nudging me back into it, which I know you are into as well. So Terraria, I'm actually gonna make a note of that for myself.
Yep, and it's pretty much, I don't think there is any like paid for DLC. So the game is relatively affordable. It has, I mean, absolutely dozens of hours to play through, and the modding community is genuinely massive. So even after you dump all the hours into beating that game to your liking, there's still so much more to do if you go looking for it. It's really a quite good game.
And that's one of the other things that I'm excited about, of just having this new PC that my MacBook has been able to handle, you know, lower grade games that I'm able to play stuff, you know, Portal 2, I was Vampire Survivors. It's not something that I would want to play something with online competitive, but it can also handle stuff like Tabletop Simulator. So it's fine, but now I'm much more unlimited in terms of what I could possibly do. And also, from what I understand, Terraria is not actually that intensive anyways, but I'm excited that I know I have the option to actually seek out games that are a bit more, you know, bleeding edge in terms of technology. So I'm very excited about that. Also, I missed Gamepedia. Thank you for the follow. I missed that a while back. I hope you're still around, but thank you so much for following. Hope you're enjoying the show. I guess speaking of Pokemon, that
Mhm.
you were talking with Akami about Pokemon yesterday. Things got a little bit sidetracked. Won't go into that too much, but
Sure.
suffice to say that you are a big Pokemon fan. That you two were actually getting into some of the nitty gritty with
Yeah.
the different things there. Um, have you ever been into competitive Pokemon? That when Akami was on my show, that was actually something that we got into for a fair bit. I'm not sure if, like for myself, I enjoy the concept of competitive Pokemon. I like watching competitive Pokemon and I
Mhm.
understand all of the different mechanics. I'm generally not going to go out of the way to build a competitive team and compete myself, but I have all of that knowledge base.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm about one step further in than you are, I would say. I do not personally have the patience to breed the perfect team or to invest hours and hours and hours to make the perfect Pokemon for the perfect team. But I do very much care for competitive Pokemon. I enjoy competitive Pokemon. I consume a lot of competitive Pokemon content. And I love Pokemon Showdown, which is a website where you can like
Yeah, I
with
love
only
Pokemon
about
Showdown.
5 or less minutes construct a completely perfect team that would take hours to construct in game.
Yeah, that I love randoms on Pokemon Showdown. I
Yep.
don't enjoy constructed, so to speak. Just I don't really have the time or interest to really get to know a meta, which is
Right.
going to be a pretty big thing. I do consume not a ton of competitive content, but whenever regionals and worlds comes around, that I'm always going to tune in for that.
Sure.
I can say that I was watching live for the famous Pachirisu win of I think 2014.
Hell yeah.
It was so good. Sejun Park, I've talked about that, just anytime that competitive Pokemon comes up, I have to bring up
Mhm.
Pachirisu because what a moment.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Would it oh geez, what is it? Nope, lost it.
Nope, poof. Uh, but yeah, so Pokemon Showdown that so have you actually been doing any team construction with new Scarlet Violet stuff, or have you yet
Nope.
to really delve into that?
No, not in the slightest. Humorously enough, one of the kids that I work with is going to be getting Pokemon Scarlet for Christmas, and I assume already has. I haven't heard. So when we get back to school on the 3rd of January, I need to make sure that I have a team that can stand up
Oh, oh
because
boy.
he challenged me. He's like Mr. Horatius, we got a battle when we get back from winter
Oh,
break
throwing
because I'm
down the
gonna
gauntlet.
yeah, because I told him I was like I'm a really good Pokemon trainer. I will absolutely destroy you. He's like, oh yeah, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. He's like, whatever. So
Eh,
if
do you
he
think
has a
this kid
good
has any ideas of what natures or EVs are?
I would say so, but I do think he is a 12-year-old boy and
Yeah, and is probably
he's
not going to have a hyper optimized team.
no, not in the slightest. And he's definitely going to bring a set of Pokemon that he thinks are cool rather than they being particularly good. So I'm not like sitting here sweating like, okay, how do I take this kid
Yeah.
down?
Oh,
Like
oh
I'm
man,
not.
gotta super plan.
Yeah, I'm not worried
So
about that.
I'm sure that will be fun, and just that. Well, if he beats you, then one cool, good for him.
Yeah,
That's
that'll be huge
like
for him.
that'd be super neat. And if you beat him, then you get to sort of be sort of mentor, and that you can then explain it like this is
Yeah.
how I did these things, and this is some of the stuff, and it can become that whole new teaching moment. And one of the reasons I think Pokemon has become just the cultural institution that it is, and it's a multi-part thing. I could go into like a thesis on it, but
Oh yeah.
one of the biggest things I think it has in its favor is the fact that it is so simple to pick up, that the
Mhm.
concept of type advantages and move power and everything is very simple. The UI is just very clean. You don't need to be a intense gamer to understand it, but there is so much depth beneath the surface that for the folks that want to get competitive, that if you want to be hyper optimal and learn about EVs, IVs, natures, all that jazz, that depth beneath the surface exists, but isn't actually vital to enjoying the game. And that is something that is admittedly very difficult to do because there's a lot of games that have tons and tons and tons of stats, but
Mhm.
they're all forward facing. They can be just overwhelming to newer
Absolutely.
players or younger people. And that Pokemon has been able to find this balance of, all right, how do we make sure that a 5-year-old can pick up this game, push the buttons, have fun, and win, but then for folks who have been lifelong fans to just continuously have new things to explore and optimize.
Well, yeah, it's a game that has an immaculately low skill floor, but a distressingly high skill ceiling.
Hmm.
Which is really important, like you were describing.
Do you have any favorite generations, whether it be just because the Pokemon that were there, the story, or the mechanics that they had?
I really have I mean, I started in Gen 1, so like there's the Kanto, you know,
Hmm.
boy in me forever. But I like Gen 5 a lot. Pokemon Black and Pokemon White. Those games
Yep.
were, in my opinion, really, really good. It was one of the generations that, after the game had been around for a while, it was like, you know what? No, we're not going to let every single Pokemon be in this game. We're going to bring our own decks. You got to learn how to play with the shortened deck of cards that are Pokemon, and you got to build your shit up, and then
And then
sure,
we'll open it up to you later.
exactly. So
Yep.
I liked that a lot. I thought that the characters, for the most part, in Gen 5 were for the most part not terribly grating. The story was acceptable because in Pokemon games, stories are generally acceptable. Like the present is fine.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
I think a lot
I
of folks
definitely like
point to Black and White as sort of peak Pokemon story design.
that.
That even then, it's not the biggest and the best and
No.
the most complex. But in terms of that sliding scale of Pokemon story, like you said, being very much a secondary factor to it all,
Mhm.
that was one of the more narratively compelling stories that they've written. It wound up at a good spot in terms of its hardware cycle being on the 3DS and was able to take advantage of a lot of things while not quite getting to the point where it chugged a bit in things like Sun and Moon. So, yeah, I feel like that definitely has become uh, one of the general consensus favorites. I myself also started in Gen 1. Gen
Mhm.
2 has a real soft spot in my heart of just I sank so many hours into silver version,
Sure.
so many hours. Looking back, I understand that, you know, the level curve there is notorious and the fact that you don't actually get to see a whole bunch of the new Pokemon until you actually get to Kanto, which is ironic.
Right.
But I just have that soft spot for the overall aesthetic and design.
Mhm.
Um, but in general, I'm a big Pokemon fan. I'm a very casual
Yeah.
Pokemon fan in that I will acknowledge, oh yeah, there's some real blemishes on this franchise of the things that they could improve upon. But every time I play one of the new games, I still just have a good time and I'm looking forward to the
Yeah.
next one. And yeah, I'd like to see things done a little bit cleaner, a little bit better, sure. But, you know, I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, and we've been able to have the gift of Pokemon for now 25 years, and I'm so happy that it is something that kids nowadays get to grow up with, and that one thing I said with the release of Scarlet and Violet, it was only the eighth time because I don't count the first game because the first game wasn't anticipated that the day before a new generation of Pokemon drops is like Christmas Eve for a lot of gamers. But at the same
Absolutely.
time, it is going to be the first time, and that every Pokemon game is someone's first Pokemon game. There are
Mhm.
people who picked up Scarlet Violet that had never played before, and their lives have been changed. And I'm just so excited to see that cycle continue because by and large, Pokemon is just such a positive force in the world. That yes, it is a corporate thing. Yes, they make money, and yeah, there's game stuff that isn't always perfect, but it's just a source of happiness for so many people.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you touched on that multi-generational aspect of Pokemon, because it is multi-generational, and it's been a cultural through line for, I mean, what was it at this point, literally 20 plus
20,
years now, like
25 years, yeah.
yeah, 25 years. um that's huge. That's huge. I mean, people talked about MASH for what, 30, 40 years, and you look back and that show is just around for 10 years, you know, 10,
Yeah.
11 years. um and like that was such a like huge cultural touchstone. And so like this is not just a popular TV show in one country, granted one of the larger media producing countries in the world at the time, but still like Pokemon is quite actually a global
It is the
phenomenon.
It is the highest grossing multimedia franchise in
Yeah,
history, period.
yeah. And for it to be around for as long, for it to touch so many lives, like that's beautiful in its own way.
Yeah, and just it's going to be interesting to see that. Speaking of multi generational, that we are now about to enter into a new generation of Pokemon anime with the announcement that Ash Ketchum is finally going to be able to retire. Something that I wasn't sure if they were ever going to do, because you have things
Mhm.
like Yu-Gi-Oh, which has been around now for I think they're going on their own 25th anniversary
Yeah,
this year. That they normalized the cycling of the main character way early on when they went
yeah.
from the original series to GX, and that just every 3 to 4 or 5 years that they have a new protagonist, and that's just part of the cycling. But the Pokemon has stuck with Ash for so long, and that the fandom is not used to this changing of the guard. And it's going to be really interesting to see how things go, because Ash has been a big institution, but
Mhm.
at the same time, it figured like eventually they kind of had to. And obviously, the joke of Ash being 10 years old for 25 years
Sure.
does get played out of it. But I'm excited to see what these new characters have, and that obviously, for the voice talent there, that this is probably going to be life changing for them. And
Oh yeah,
it'll be cool to see the kids that get to grow up with these new protagonists.
absolutely. And no matter what media piece you're talking about, when you have performances or when you have your showrunners change, like that's a touchstone moment for that. Doctor Who, for example, like that
Hmm.
has like been a big thing for that for decades of who the new Doctor is going to be and all that jazz. So I agree. It'll be very compelling to see how they approach this moving on.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would love to see the Pokemon franchise do that they haven't done yet? And you can be, you know, as unrealistic as you want to be. Of just you could say, I want a Pokemon survival game along the lines of the Long Dark, even though it is unlikely that Game Freak and the Pokemon
Sure,
Company are
would
going to
ever
do
do
that.
so.
Is there
Yeah.
something that you'd like to see from the franchise?
Hmm. I look forward to Pokemon Generation like 13 or 14 when VR really gets like super massive and incredibly approachable and like market available
Mm,
to a large amount of people. That we get a VR Pokemon game where you can travel down Route 1 from one town to the next, and you can go and you can actually see the ecosystem of the Pokemon present in real time. Like that's the down the road that I'm looking forward to. Because like
hmm.
now we've got in Sword and Shield with the wild area and Scarlet and Violet with like the whole damn thing. Like this seeing the world fleshed out in a more honest way instead
Yeah.
of just a bunch of basically non-gridded squares with tall grass.
Yeah, yeah. And Legends Arceus was another game that I just fell into big time. Again, the exploration aspect was really fun and compelling, and
Yeah.
it was the first time that I actually completed a Pokedex because I wanted to fight Arceus. Holy cow, did I want to fight Arceus? And eh, that was a very fun experience, and I was very happy to see the results of it as the Pokemon Company's real first foray into that. And you can see the influences of that as their sort of testing ground for what became
Oh yeah.
Scarlet Violet. And I'm sure we'll continue to see more iterations on it, because that's really what they do. They iterate.
Yeah.
And I really much like your line of thinking of, all right, we now have the more living, breathing world in terms of, a gameplay experience where you are holding a controller. We've had the Pokemon Go and Let's Go experience of being able to physically throw a Pokeball. And I say physically with some air
Sure.
quotes here, but
Right.
it's more than what we've had in the past. And that sort of pairing of mechanics and just the iteration and growth of those mechanics into proper VR, which I agree, obviously we are not there yet, but it feels inevitable that down the road, whether it be 10, 15-ish years, that we're almost certainly going to have something of that capability, and it'll be interesting to see what form it takes.
Yeah, and to sort of dial it back my answer a little bit and provide a more traditional answer, I suppose. I want the grit system back. I want you to release like a dozen Pokemon and get EV slash IV consume items, so maxing out a Pokemon is faster because
Mm.
because those systems are really really old. They're dated. They're time consuming. They're stupid. We had Grit in Arceus. It was really really good. I like that. We should do that again.
Yeah, and that also just from a design perspective feels very reminiscent of what you have in Pokemon Go, where you get I forget if it's called like dust or whatever, the thing of just when you catch more that you can then sort of cycle them into this resource that you can funnel into a single Pokemon of that same
Candy, I think it
species.
is.
Candies, yeah. Um, and like from a design perspective, I wonder if catching more Pokemon of that type is the best way to do it, or if there's going to be some other mechanic for it, because it's a lot easier to catch more things very quickly in Pokemon Go and in Legends Arceus than you have in some other versions of the game. So I think it's definitely one avenue they could go for design,
Yeah.
but I wonder if they might find something even more streamlined and compelling. But I very much agree that something akin to the grit system, where you, like you said, don't have to worry about conventional EV training and that you can just get a resource through some other method, would
Yeah.
be really, really nice to see.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have any favorite Pokemon? I know it's the classic question, and it's a big question with now
It is.
over 1,000 to decide from.
Sure.
So I'll let you even pick a handful if you'd like.
My favorite Pokemon that is really bad. I have a lot of my favorites are bad. Parasect is one of my first favorites, and it's a bug grass type that is not particularly fast. It doesn't have very good defenses. It has a decent attack stat, and has access to Spore. But like it's a little insect crab guy with mushrooms. I love him, but he's trash.
Oh, it's awful. Now, do you know Liminal Lark?
Yes, and I know his affiliation with Paris and Parasect.
Yeah, that is exactly where I was going, because I was like, you know, he was on the show only a couple episodes ago, actually. Nice. And obviously, Paris and Parasect are not a very common answer to the question.
No.
So as soon as you said Parasect, I was like, wait a minute. If Horatius doesn't know Lark, they might be best friends.
Yeah. I also really really like Magnezone.
Ooh, okay.
Magnemite and Magneton were one of my favorites back in Gen 1 in the olden times. But in the more recent, I've loved Magnezone. I'll use him on pretty much every single team I can. Let's see. I'll say one of the Pokemon that I really, really like from the new generation is Cloth, another bad Pokemon. But he's a crab. He's a big old crab.
Yeah, crabs.
I love him.
Yeah. He's big and dopey and just fun.
Yeah.
And one thing I have been open about on the show before is that I am from the state of Maryland and do not live there anymore, but I still very much hold, you know, the place that I grew up near and dear to my heart, and Maryland crabs are very much a thing. So me and a couple friends were super happy because the shiny version of Cloth is a blue crab, which for folks who don't know, that Maryland blue crabs are one of the things that the state is most famous for, and that crabs are red when you cook them, but when you find them in the ocean, that they are blue, and that's obviously where they get their name. So I actually get the feeling that may have been a more deliberate shiny choice, because I know historically sometimes they just did what is the inverse in the color palette, but they've been a bit more thoughtful as generations have gone on of, all right, how are things going to look? And obviously Maryland blue crabs being blue are not the only crabs that have that color palette. So while I don't necessarily think it was a direct thing for, you know, the state of Maryland, I don't think Pokemon companies think that specifically, but I think it was very deliberate that there are a good number of crabs that, when uncooked, have the blue coloring, and I very much appreciated that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been open with my community as well. Like I am from Crabland. So yeah, very similarly to how you said it, like that meant a lot to me as well.
Yeah, just the little things.
Yeah, you got to find the joy in this. There's a handful of other ones. You know, I love the occasional legendary. Yveltal, actually, the flying dark. One was
Yeah.
a I think that thing has a really sick design and relatively unique typing. Pretty rad. Yeah, I got favorites from all over the generations, I think, but I think that those are
Mm,
some pretty good picks.
yeah. For me, my favorite is Metagross, which not the rarest of answers, also not the most
Sure.
common. That it's a pseudo legendary, so it is very powerful. I just like Steel Psychic in general. That I enjoy Steel as a typing. I like that it has a lot of resistances, and Psychic is very fun and flavorful and offensive, and it's a supercomputer tank.
Yeah,
It's just cool.
yeah, it's very cool. Um, yeah, Metal Gear's great typing, great competitive Pokemon. Was an absolute demon in its debut generation.
Mm. And gosh, when it comes to legendaries, when it comes to design, Rayquaza is just kind of peak Pokemon design
Mm.
for me. That it's big, flying, cool dragon. Not my favorite in terms of battling, but purely for aesthetic purposes, I've
Oh
always
yeah,
loved it. Um, when it comes to overall like use, that I don't use legendaries a ton, so I don't know if I really have one that I'd pick there. So my mind usually just goes to the aesthetics.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, just I could talk Pokemon all day. I'm not gonna go too far down that because I know that there's a lot of other things. But uh, the other type of games that I know you're really into are Souls-like,
Yes.
and that's it's a very different type of game from the other ones that we've discussed so far.
Right.
What is it about Souls games that really just grab you?
There's an intimacy in in action RPGs as a genre um, that I first developed a relationship with in Monster Hunter One.
Ooh,
Um, and had I known how much training for Dark Souls that game was going to do for me, and that series as a whole was going to do for me, I would have um, I don't know, constructed a shrine of appreciation to Capcom. I don't know, but I love the Monster Hunter series and the relationship in that game of like almost every single stage or quest in Monster Hunter um, is you versus a big monster, and so you dance, you fight, you battle. You learn the ins and outs. You go, okay, this thing's doing a tail whip. It's gonna follow up with this. It always follows up with this. There's an intimacy in that battle and that bout that I found incredibly enrapturing. And so here comes this game series, um, in Demon Souls, yes, and Kingsfield before it, but primarily, mainly blew up with Dark Souls, and was my first experience with Dark Souls. And I played it, and I was like, okay, cool. Somewhat dark, somewhat gritty, medieval fantasy. That's my bag. Let's go. Um, and then the very first boss of that game, the Asylum Demon, is like, I'm this big booty bitch and I'm gonna hit you with this club. And so I was like, oh, I'm in. Because I gotta learn how to dance with this big club swinging demon to even begin to play the game. And I don't know, just every single time one of those games comes out or a game like it comes out, I'm invested. Because it's so, I guess the word I keep using is intimate. It's a very intimate challenge.
yeah, and there's something really cool of I feel like game design started there because technologically that's where it had to be, of that you
Sure.
couldn't have really complex boss sequences, and that Monster Hunter was one of the games, one of the franchises that really just took it to its logical extreme to, that all right, even if we have sort of these technical limitations that we have to have certain sequences of things, that they really ratcheted it up to 11 and made just a couple extra bits of flair and power to it all that really made it feel so much more like a feature. And no, this is how we want to design, not that we are limited by our design.
Yeah.
And I think Souls games and Souls-like games have very much leaned into that as well. That you can tell that they understand that nowadays they don't need to do that, but they love that, and that you sort of have these, just for lack of a better term, these artists who say, all right, I love this type of combat, this type of boss design, and what can I build with this? That I'm a big fan of the phrase, restrictions breed creativity, and
Mhm.
that they have taken those restrictions and are just being so creative with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
is there any particular battle or mechanic or type of steps in the dance that you really enjoy, that when you see a boss doing a certain thing or have an epiphany moment of, oh, this is how this one works, that you really enjoy something specific?
There's a handful of moments to the Souls series that have left very notable impressions on me, um, which I feel is like the heart of your question.
Yeah.
Um, I think that the Estus Flask system and the checkpoints of bonfires is a really important um, gameplay core to those games, and that's why when you see, you know, any game under the sun call itself a Souls like, you kind of by definition have checkpoints that when you rest at them refresh all the enemies but also refill your consumables, blah blah blah. Like that seems to be a through line to that genre or subgenre. And I love that. I love that it's like, okay, you want to play Mario stage 1 again, well, you can do that, but you got to do it from the beginning, and everything that you accomplished up to this point, well, that's back too. All the obstacles are back. So it's about perfecting, learning the rhythm of that world until you can beat the stage with as little mistakes as possible. Which is funny because you can look at games much older than the Souls series where they did the exact same thing. Look at Sonic Adventure, right? Sonic Adventure will rate you at the end of the stage, or even like Devil May Cry will rate you at the end of the stage based off of how well you performed the gameplay loop as expected, based off of rings collected, time, etc., collectibles, all that stuff. And it's the same thing, but because it's so less transparent
Mm-hmm.
in
That
a Souls game, it feels
that
good.
it's not just, all right, I'm going back to a menu and restarting the stage, but the fact that the mechanics of the reset and that the whole act of resting at a bonfire is
Yeah.
integrated into the gameplay experience, that there is some amount of flavorfulness to it all, but also, honestly, just the lack of a loading screen,
Mhm.
the lack of immersion breaking. I can very much see how that takes that to the next level and creates, like you said, that more intimate experience.
Yeah, and well, and it's like I know what getting a B grade, is like. I get those in the real world, haha. Um, Whereas in Dark Souls, it's like, okay, I've got 5 different encounters between me and the boss. One with 3 undead, one with 2 undead, and a ranged unit, one with a pair of dogs or whatever. But like, I have this many mistakes in the form of Estus flasks that I'm allowed
Hmm.
to make before I get to the boss. And I got to the boss and I have 2 flasks left. That's not enough. I get bodied while learning the boss. Okay, I gotta beat the stage better this time so that I have enough resources to learn the capstone to this stage. I don't know. There's something that I've always loved about that process of refining a skill set on a micro level so that you have what you need to face the final test.
Hmm. And like I mentioned, I work in the game industry. Design is not my area, but it's
Mhm.
something of just having grown up with games, always wanted to work in the game industry, and now
Yeah.
working in the game industry. Even though design is not my territory, so to speak, I've become much more sensitive and aware of design choices, and that's partially
Yeah.
why I've been using the word design a lot in terms of talking about certain games.
Mhm.
And the once again design choice of having something like Estus Flax, instead of just having your health meter and it's all right that you can take 5 or 6 or however many hits before dying, or
Mhm.
that you have some other gauge of how many mistakes you can make and health that you have in a single bar, that it's such a interesting and simplistic change to it all of, all right, in a sense your Estus flasks are just extensions of your health bar, but the fact that you have to actively position yourself where you can do that, because if you are not using your Estus flask, it's basically like you never have an extension of your health bar. But if you have it, if you have a giant health bar and you can take 5, 6, however many hits,
Mhm.
and you don't need just that 1, 2 second of disengagement to be able to drink the flask, that creates a very different game altogether,
Mhm.
because the the steps in that dance inherently change when you have to take that step out of the either just the proximity or your battle flow, that the decisions you make as a player, if you know, all right, I can take this hit and just sort of push through it because I know I have enough health to keep going, the fact that you, generally speaking, can't take 3 hits in a row is going to change just how you play and strategize in the game. And it's such a small, fundamental thing that ripples throughout every single boss fight, every single encounter. And I love when something so small mechanically can have such profound implications of how you design and play the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
I love seeing those cool things, and like you said, that that simple mechanic, that combined with the bonfires, really gave rise to this entire subgenre that, in the past 10, 15 years has become one of the mainstays of the industry at large.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting to think of Estus flasks as an evolution of a for the most part, if not entirely by this point, dead mechanic that used to be like part and parcel for any video game, and that's the lives system. Like, we don't really see video games with a live system anymore, but effectively they were just a more macro scale version of the same concept. Like, oh, here's Mario, you have 3 mistakes. Sometimes you get to make 2 mistakes per life, depending upon if you have a power up in you or not, but you have 3 mistakes before you get a game over and do the whole heckin' thing over again. Whereas in Dark Souls with the flasks, it's like, okay, you have 5 mistakes basically that you can make while beating the undead Berg or whatever it is.
I never actually thought of it from that particular vantage point, but you're completely correct there, and that makes it even more interesting for me, just the fact that it is sort of the reviving or repurposing of one of the oldest tricks in the book, and that was a trick that came partially as a result of design limitations, partially because most games were going to be designed for arcade play, and that you had to have some easy way to determine what is game over, when does someone have to put in another quarter, that you then saw adapted into the console and handheld space, just because, well, this is where a lot of design is, and that generally you're going to see that adoption of just design thought, whether it be something like games or other software, hardware products, what have you, and then to go through this sort of parabola of, all right, we've gotten away from it, and like you said, we don't really see the live system nowadays, and then bring it back, not quite in the same way, but now also as a feature more than that restriction, or for the purposes that it was initially designed for 20, 30 years ago.
Absolutely.
Are there any types, I guess, if you could make a change or an addition to the Souls genre, is there something that you'd like to see, someplace that you hope eventually that franchise, whether it be, that genre, whether it be Dark Souls itself or, Elden Ring or anything else, that you'd like to see in a game that keeps most of that design the same, but changes something that you think would actually be either just very fun for you as an individual, or that you think could be more profound for the genre at large?
Can I give you a similarly fantastical answer as you permitted the first time we did this?
Yes, absolutely.
I would like a button in the game that when you delete your save, it shoots out a Men in Black nebulizer and wipes your memory of the game experience. Because literally the only thing I've ever wanted out of a Souls game that I haven't
to
been able
replay
to
it for the
get,
first time again.
exactly, is to have a first time experience again. And
okay. I think I have a simpler answer and a more feasible one for you. It's still very difficult, but it's going to be easier than the Men in Black solution, and that is procedural generation.
Yes, and so you have games like Dead Cells that do that. And so you have this
Legendary count is where I am. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why we have the rogue-like and rogue-lite subgenre, right? Where you have these games that similarly approach conflict and overcoming obstacles via a Souls like idea, but on a macro meta scale, it is procedurally generated, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, like that's another genre of games that I actually should have mentioned to you when we were talking before, because that's another genre of games that I have a very big affiliation for pretty much the exact same reason that we've already sort of come to the conclusion of.
It's not quite a Souls-like, but just because it is procedurally generated in a way that is generally not seen in the franchise. Have you played any of the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games?
No, actually, I haven't. It's a bit of a secret shame of mine that I haven't touched those series.
It's one of the side series, and admittedly not one of the most, well, I'm not going to say that it's not well known, but it's not one of the first side series that you think of when you think of the, frankly, many Pokemon side series. So trust me, that's a forgivable sin, but I will recommend that to you most definitely. That just, it's a really fun take on just the concept of Pokemon battles. And if you like story, the Mystery Dungeon games is where Pokemon's best storytelling across the entire franchise is.
Right.
But when it comes to roguelikes as a whole, are there any favorites in that one? Oh, hello, Akami. Good to see ya.
Yes. That is my best answer. Yes, there are. Gosh, tons, genuinely tons. I'm just like pulling up a list. I love Barony. Is an amazing, wildly underappreciated roguelike.
I've heard the name. I don't know anything about that one, or if I did, I've forgotten. So I can imagine, based on the title, some basics, but like, walk me through this. What is Barony?
Barony is a first-person fantasy-themed type of. It almost feels more like a Kingsfield type game, where like it's here's 20 levels of ascending difficulty in a tower or a dungeon or whatever you want to call it. And just like, you pick a starting character and you go and you delve, you fight, you explore, you acquire skills, and then when you die, you're done. Start over. Which is, Darkest Dungeon is another one. Love Darkest Dungeon. The second game is also absolutely immaculate. Still in early access though.
So looking up Barony,
yes.
Aesthetically speaking, it feels similar to Minecraft, that this is a very low
Voxely,
poly, very blocky type of game. And outside of Minecraft itself, you don't see a lot of games, perhaps ironically for how successful Minecraft is, that there aren't that many that actually really let themselves have such simplistic graphics.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That is undervalued as a corner to cut is graphical prowess, which is a shame.
So Barony, I guess, is there a particular mechanic or approach to the game that makes it stand out, or is it just a combination of it doing a lot of the tropes and the more predictable factors with particular competency, or just excelling at them?
I would say, yeah, it's more of the latter of those two things. Like, it just is incredibly solid at what it does. It's good. It's a good all-arounder. Dead Cells is also another one that I think is incredibly good. For very similar reasons. Just it's got a very engaging atmosphere. But I don't know. The only thing that I would say is like a notable downside about Barony is that it is a relatively long game. Like one time, I just threw out a bunch of cheats because I just wanted to see, like, reasonably speaking, how long would a run of this game take, and it was still like multiple hours to get to the end of the game, and that was with like no real threat to me whatsoever. So I would say that's a detriment, is that it's got a very long play time, but it's incredibly good at its fundamentals, which I think is an underappreciated aspect of a video game, is having its fundamentals of a genre being done well.
Yeah, that's something that I always appreciate, whether it's, games or just, I'm a big anime watcher, and that there are shows that I
Mhm.
watch that don't do anything that's new, but they take their respective genre tropes or,
Mhm.
storytelling and characters and just do something really, really well. And that you don't always need to be reinventing the wheel. It's sometimes
Mhm.
if if you just have that competency and uh, are really able to excel at those other things, because tropes and standards got there because people like them.
Yep.
And if you were able to take the things that people like and do them really, really well, surprise, surprise, you're going to have something good on your hands.
Yep. There's I can't believe I overlooked this one. The Binding of Isaac.
Now that's when I know. Yeah, I
That's
see. Talk about your simplistic graphics
oh
while
yeah.
still having something that's just super fun. That's one that you see streamed by a lot of folks even now.
Mhm.
How old is that game at this point? Like a
Jeez, it's
decade at least, I think.
at least I'm gonna look it up actually right now.
For some reason, I feel like it started as a Flash game. Why do I... Did it?
It did start as a Flash game.
Okay, yeah.
Let's see here.
That's a whole thing for me of just, very formative, playing
Mhm.
Flash games online.
Okay.
That even when I was younger, I was never a big PC gamer, and I think that's part of why I haven't gotten a PC, or rather a gaming level PC until now, is because I've always more so just enjoyed a lot of the franchises that were available on console, not so
Mhm.
much on PC, so I wasn't losing out as much. But I played Flash games on so many different
Oh
sites
yeah.
growing up, and just that's a really particular era of gaming, which is super interesting because it also served as the the breeding ground, the stomping ground for a lot of folks who have now become professional game designers. That it
Yep.
was one of the first areas that there was the minimal, or at least significantly reduced, barrier to entry for game development and release, and that the industry's next big shakeup was with the advent of smartphones, that with the release
Yeah.
of the iPhone, that you had all these games that can now just be available. You no longer need a conventional publisher, and then Steam came along, and the
Mhm.
fact that the barrier to entry to be a game creator is not this massive, intensive process that used to exist, where you needed to go through, Sony, Nintendo, whoever, to get published on a specific console, needed to worry about production and shipping and all these physical manufacturing snarls along the way. And that's just been a huge thing for gaming at large.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to get wrapped up in the industry. Period.
Hmm.
Um, you can be a literally individual with a lot of free time and a love for code, and come out of nowhere and oops, make Undertale.
Yep. Or just,
uh,
there's, like we've been saying, Binding of Isaac, or
yep.
Flappy Bird is one that I point to a lot of, just
Mhm.
begrudging as it might be of it not being a complex game, that you have
Sure.
to recognize just how big that game got for being
Absolutely.
so simple and just this one person, and uh, the fact that there are so many folks that have been able to, like you said, come along. And Undertale obviously is a really, really prolific one that I will go out of my way and say that I think Toby Fox is one of the greatest melody writers of our time.
I definitely agree with that.
Just
Um, by
he
the
knows
way,
how to write earworms.
Agreed. By the way, Binding of Isaac came out in 2011.
Oof. So, yep,
Yeah.
that is 11 years ago, over a
Yep.
decade.
But yeah, there's a ton of them. I love Death Road to Canada. Is another
Ooh, yeah, I've seen that one.
very simple graphics but very charming writing.
Mhm.
Oh, jeez, I was just looking at it. Drat. Like looking at my Steam library. Oh, Devil's Spire is like a romantic letter to the Kingsfield series. That plays like that. It's really, really, really good. Highly recommend that one.
I don't think I've heard of that one.
Yep, Devil Spire.
Devil Spire. Okay, I'm gonna have to look that one up. Yeah. There's just obviously, like I said, even though I don't play as many games as I used to, I
Mhm.
got into the gaming industry for a reason, that I just have
Right.
just games are such a important artistic medium, important
Oh yeah.
entertainment medium, and even as someone who does not necessarily play as much, that I still watch a bunch, and that's been one of the other benefits of VTuber Talk for me, frankly, is that I get to watch so many people play these different games, and that there is a very different type of experience naturally between playing a game and watching a game. But at the same time, it has allowed me to experience genres that I know I don't enjoy. That, for example, I don't really enjoy the dance of Souls-like games, but I love watching it. I love seeing people iterate who are able to just be in this calm zen. I don't that it's sometimes fun for me to watch folks who rage a little bit, but I really just enjoy seeing someone who is able to be super calm, methodical. All right, we're gonna try this again. Oh, oops, made a mistake that one time, and be able to then overcome that hurdle and see this, the incredible design, hear the music in a game that just for me is not going to be as much fun as a player, but I'm able to still enjoy these games in a different way. And it's been very nice for me. Whereas I have actually avoided tuning into Pokemon streams because I've been busy lately and haven't been able to get past like the second gym yet because I've just been preoccupied with other stuff. So I have actually not tuned in to Akami's stream a lot lately. Hi, Akami. I did see you in there earlier because she's been playing Pokemon a lot, and I've been,
Right.
Keeping spoilers away. But just, there's so many different ways even to just enjoy and consume games. And I love that we live in an age where you have so many options because it used to be, well, not only were there fewer games released, fewer genres, fewer good games among the games released, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And even then, it was, there was no streaming, that there wasn't going to be YouTube, and that you couldn't watch Let's Plays and things like that. And you had to play a game yourself or maybe read about it in an online post. And even
Yeah.
then, you're probably not going to get much from it. And that
Absolutely.
just the way that you can consume the artistic medium that is games even now has those increased options, and that increased accessibility is just a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. At 100%.
Wow, we talked games for a while. That we just sort of fell in there and just obviously games and VTubers sort of go hand in hand because,
Sure.
well, being on a platform like Twitch, you're going to do that a lot. But that for you, one of the things that you mentioned to me is that you consider yourself to be one of the most non-VTuber VTubers. And obviously, playing games, doing just chatting, that's a piece of being a VTuber. Your design being just by nature influenced more by Western media as opposed to Eastern media is definitely going to be an inherent aesthetic piece that sets you apart. That it has been nice for me, just as someone who isn't a VTuber, to see the increased diversity of models and themes. That it's understandable why a lot started with the more Eastern anime and inspired art style, because, well, that's where a lot of this came from. Only natural that you have that
Right.
holdover there. But it's very exciting to see folks really just understanding that this technology can allow you to do anything and be anything that you want to be, and that you were able to take full advantage of that. But is there anything else that makes you feel that you are, quote unquote, a non-VTuber VTuber?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of tropes in the subculture of, because, like, make no mistake, VTubers are content creators, right? First and foremost, but they are in and of themselves a sub genre or a subculture of that subculture. So like a two steps removed subculture. um in terms of like content creation. So like, because there's all, I openly call it baggage. There's a lot of baggage to VTubing from where it's come from, which is the idol world of, like Japan, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that is, you've already said the key phrase of where I think the vast majority of VTubing's baggage comes from,
yeah,
and that it's not even VTubing's baggage, it's the idol industry's baggage that
exactly.
VTubers brought along with it. That I'm gonna let you name some specifics first, but I think that you are already on the right path.
Yeah, and so because I buck a lot of those norms and don't like play the idle game, like I don't have like a boyfriend girlfriend experience to my content. I don't like I very 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 strongly hazard the the downsides of parasocial relationships. You know, mainly, and I feel like a lot of that comes from who I am as a person, but a lot of that comes from my understanding of psychology and my understanding of mental health and how damaging it can be to someone to have a intimate, strong parasocial relationship with somebody online is incredibly damaging if not done in a healthy way. Um, that said, I do think that you can have a healthy relationship with many people, even in a parasocial way. It's just about whether or not you're being manipulated or being abused in that
Yeah,
relationship, and that
and
can
that
be good.
yeah, and I was saying that there is the balance that you understand. All right, this is a parasocial relationship, and where is the
Yes,
boundary of healthy versus unhealthy?
yes, because that boundary does get obfuscated quite easily by some of the personalities in this space. And so, because I buck those trends, because I'm so self-conscious about the parasocial relationships that I have with my community, for example, and the community at large, and also just like, I don't know, I don't engage with a lot of the networking and a lot of the tropes and trends chasing of the VTuber world. Like I see a lot of um younger content creators get wrapped up in like, oh, this is the expectation of being a VTuber. You get a PNG, you get a 2D, then you go 3D, then you go back to 2D, and you're always debuting a new model, you're always showcasing something new, you're always doing an event. There's always this focus on big. There's always got to be something sort of push you out from the ranks of all of the other content creators. And frankly, fuck that. I'm older. I'm bored of that. That's a young person's game, and it's a bad one to play to begin with.
Yeah, and
So,
the one thing that's been really cool for me to see is that yes, you do find a lot of folks falling into that mindset, into that trap, really. And I love seeing people realize and then pull themselves out of it. That I've had folks on this very show say, I started out the first several months thinking I had to do this certain thing, and then I realized, wait a minute, no, I don't. And that's the best because
yes.
a lot of those, like I said, those mental traps that you can wind up in are perfectly logical ones and understandable
Yep.
ones. That there is a reason that so many people wind up there. It's not an accident. It's not total random happenstance. There is a lot to do with the broader environment that folks come into, and just whether it be a combination of social expectation that actually exists or ones that artificially get created in the mind of seeing, all right, I see a lot of people doing subathons, therefore I must do a subathon. No, subathons can be successful if done well. They can
Yep.
be done healthily. But sometimes just if you are new and unfamiliar in the space, that if you don't have full context for certain things, that you can incorrectly, even if logically, find yourself doing things that you don't enjoy or frankly aren't even necessary. And that it's still a wonderful learning experience to see people come out on the other side. And then there have been others that I've seen that take advantage of certain things in a super healthy way. That there's a couple people I know out there that will debut a model every month or two because they're a model maker and they just freaking love making models. And they
Mhm.
will, that's how they spend some of their free time, some of it either on stream, some of it off. And that's their way of showcasing their work and their own portfolio in a way, but also just because that's something that they enjoy, or in some cases even stumbled upon because they like the idea of having different models, couldn't afford it. So they said, well, I'm going to get myself trained up in art and I'm going to
Yep.
learn live 2D. And that they can then even take those negative expectations and trappings and find new healthy passions out of them. And that there's just no one right way to do it. And there are a lot of unhealthy things, a lot of unhealthy trends and mindsets that people can wind up in. And it's super satisfying for me to see folks find their way out of it in any number of ways. And then ideally, even end up reversing things to be super healthy and sometimes even just profitable, frankly, for them.
Sure.
And, when you got into VTubing, did you find yourself even once, do you feel Was there a moment that you perhaps caught yourself saying, I might be thinking about something in a way that I don't need to, or, even if you very quickly reverse it or never put something into action, are there times that you yourself have found, your line of thinking going quote unquote astray, so to speak?
So I've been very open about this, and I've told the story a couple of times before, but it is a perfect story to tell for that question. So I started VTubing when I was unemployed because of the pandemic shut the school down that I was working at, and so there was no work to be had. Um, so I was a bit desperate, financially speaking. Um, so I got into VTubing, and then October that year, I had picked up the job that I'm currently at in July that year. So I had been working that job for a couple of months, and then it was October last year, and I was sitting there and I was like, I can't do this, man. I can't work a full-time job and keep doing this content creation the way I've been approaching it. Something has to change. And so I came up with what needed to change, and it was I needed to oh, sorry, one moment.
All good. While Horatius takes care of things, thank you all so much for tuning in. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. See a couple of you out there in chat. Thank you so much. That if you have your own follow-up questions, that I cannot promise that I will ask everything out there, but I do occasionally take some lines of conversation from chat. But even if you're just lurking and enjoying Lurkers Make the World Go Round, appreciate you so much for being here in any capacity at all. If you're enjoying, feel free to follow here on Twitch and on Twitter. It's just Vtuber Talk. I do these shows about once a week. And even if you're not following me, be sure to follow Horatius. His links are right here at the bottom of the screen. I got the shout out. And dang it, I realized I forgot to change my channel panels. That is the one thing. I knew I forgot something. Ugh.
There's always something. Sorry. So I realized that something needed to change. So what I had been approaching content creation, this was foolhardy, I'll admit. I was pursuing it very, very actively, putting a lot of time into. I was like, and this needs to be something that works for me. This needs to be something that I'm pushing for. And I was like trying to come up with ideas of, how to achieve more concurrent viewers and how to increase my reach and how to blah, 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 blah. All of the trappings that we had discussed before. Although generally not acting on them. I was never much of a trend chaser. But I was like, I'm not doing, it's not doing enough. This isn't going fast enough. And as I sat down with myself and I said, listen, I think either I stop doing content creation and I move on and, fill my spare time with another hobby, or I reframe this one. And so I chose to reframe the streaming and content creation. This is a creative outlet for me. It always was, but it is now purely that. And so, I do this because it's creatively fulfilling to play video games and talk to people and discuss psychology and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be the closest I would ever say that I genuinely got to kerfuffling in any major fashion.
And that it was just when you realized you were getting a bit overwhelmed between IRL obligations, so to speak, and content creation, that you made that conscious, healthy effort and decision of saying, all right, I do need to scale back here and I need to find where that balance is, because I'm very much of the school of thought that life is about finding balance and that you can make anything unhealthy if you do it too much or not enough. And that for perhaps not all, but most things, that you can find a healthy balance. And, even for me in VTuber Talk, that it was designed at the conceptual level of being a small personal project with no intent of return, and something I wanted to be able to start and maintain with a perhaps not minimalist level of effort, but a predictable and consistent level of effort that I could just continue at a simple pace. Yeah. And I am very pleased to say that almost 2 years in, Vtuber Talk is functioning exactly as intended. That I qualified for affiliate accidentally when I happened to have 3 shows within 7 days, a couple months in, and I never accepted affiliate. I'm very much of the opinion that for the irregularity of my streams, that one, I don't think I'd be able to get a significant subscriber base anyways, and that for the amount I could potentially bring in, it's not worth the extra effort of putting on my taxes. But
Yep.
also, I recognize that as a content creator, I very deliberately painted myself into a corner where I need other people to be able to function.
Right.
And that for the first year, I had a donation link at the bottom of the page, just via Streamlabs and PayPal. And anything that came in was split 50-50 with the guest that was on at the time of the donation. I got a total of 6 donations in my first year. When I had my first anniversary charity marathon, I naturally brought down the donation link to put up the charity link. And after the charity marathon, I never put the donation link back up. And I am just fine with that. And, I tell people that if you want to be successful as a content creator, if you want to grow as a content creator and, have that healthy relationship with numbers and figuring out what works best just in terms of operating and building a community, building a fan base, do everything that I don't do. Make sure not to just do collabs. Make sure to have a regular schedule. Make sure to have a Discord, which I don't have. Sometimes it's good to follow a trend to a certain extent if it is something that you feel you can do and still have fun while doing healthily.
Right.
But that VTuber Talk and what I want from it is completely contrarian to most conventional content creation methodology, but that it is perhaps not deliberately supposed to be contrarian to that, but I knew what I wanted from it, and it just so happened to be contrarian, and I am all right with that. And it's just, I also like to say, if you are looking to grow and be a full-time content creator, obviously don't do what I do, but I like to also be an example of, if you don't want to make content creation a big thing for you, that you can do what I do and just choose something that is totally divergent, suboptimal, but if it is what is fun and healthiest for you, then it is optimal.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that takeaway because the little 2 cents I'll throw in there. I don't want to get like weirdly theological or philosophical here, but like I'm very much of the opinion that I'm not terribly sure what happens after it's all over. But one thing that I know for sure, and that's you got to be able to look over your shoulder after all the things that you've done, all of the days are over, and be proud of what you've done, and be able to look at it and say, you know what, I did this my way. I'm okay with what I've done.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead.
And so like in a microcosm, looking at how you conduct yourself in the content creation space, I think is really important to look over your shoulder and say, okay, I'm at 1,000 followers and my concurrent is this, or whatever the hell it is, whatever we're talking about, whatever the metric stick you want to measure yourself by is, you can look over how I got here and am I okay with what I did to get here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sort of a 3 of the biggest things for me, not just in content creation, but in life, in order are: do no harm, have fun, if possible, do active good. That, at the very least, while you're having fun, do no harm. It's okay right. if your fun is a net neutral and not negative impact, that's fine, because right. The fun to you is then a positive. Obviously, first and foremost, it is not good if you are having fun and doing harm in the process. But sure. Then also, if you are able to do no harm, have fun, and also do something good in the process, even better. And
that's ideal.
That's part of one of the big things for me of why I am so passionate about the anniversary charity marathon.
Yep.
And that I'm super looking forward to doing the second one next month, and just that trying to do little good things here and there. Obviously continuing to help promote and shout out past guests over time, and I know I'm not a very big account. I know that the odds of me getting a significant number of eyes on my guests is very, very low, if not zero. Um, but I realize maybe over time that situation will change, and maybe despite my lack of effort to do so, that I will accumulate a small following and be able to actually sort of pay things back in the way of being able to get a bit of extra attention on my guests, because I do recognize that at this point in time, that for the entirety of VTuber Talk's existence thus far, I have been the beneficiary of others' kindness, both in their time, in their communities coming and stopping by my channel. Because, like I said, I don't have a community of my own, be it one that is in a significant regular viewership. I know that there's a couple, but I don't have a Discord. I ran a Discord professionally because at one point in time I was a community manager, and I never want to do it again. So that's one of the other things of, by design VTuber Talk right out of the gate. I knew I wasn't going to start one. And I knew that trying to start a Discord and have something like that is the logistically, numerically correct move to do. And I just said, absolutely not. I'm not. And I have not questioned that decision once.
Good.
Is there anything in your own journey that you started off thinking, all right, I don't want to do this, and then realized, actually, I might want to do this, or I do want to do this? Not in the sense that you felt that you had to, but perhaps something you stumbled across that you didn't think you would enjoy or actively want to do that you now find yourself actively enjoying.
There's a lot of things that I've chosen to never do or to not do, that I have continued to not shake on, that to not give ground on. But there are two things that I can answer this question with, and one of them is receive or ask for financial support. It's actually been a really big part of my character that I and like my personhood, like my whole life. This has been a very big thing for me, that I do not ask from others. I just don't do that. I don't like to feel like I'm a burden. I don't like to endeavor other people. I don't like to take charity. Whatever, like however I choose to frame it. I do not like to receive from others. And that's something that very, very recently, only the past couple of months, I've been comfortable. I got a throne recently. That was not easy for me to be comfortable with doing that, but that is something that has happened. And then the other thing is, I did not want to. I wanted to be able to look over my process as a content creator and achieve whatever metrics I was caring about, and go, I did this because of me. I did not do this because I had friends with big audiences that boosted me. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to achieve things because I, buttered up to somebody and siphoned some clout, which is, just as much of a joking statement as anything else. I'm very conscious about that. And yet, I do know a lot of people that have much bigger audiences than me, and I've become, disgruntlingly more comfortable with letting them talk about me and letting them, point people in my direction and saying like, oh, like this, I know a guy. I know a mental health professional, and it's this dude. He's really cool. You should know about him. But for a long time, I not to be like some sort of weird name dropping guy, but like I've known Cabal for a long time, over a year. And when I knew Cab, I very specifically told him, I said, I know you're growing a lot. I know you have a very big audience. Don't talk about me. If I show up in your chat, don't shout me out. Do not perceive me. do not tell the rest of the world that I exist, because I don't want to feel like I got somewhere because I happen to know somebody. I want to feel like I built this. And he was like, I want to talk about you. I think you're really cool. I think you're doing really important things. I think you're talking about very important topics, and I think people should know about you. And it took a long time for me to be comfortable with that. for people like Cab to be like, hey, you guys should know about Horatius. Like that would have been like I'm gonna walk away from my computer moment. Like eight or so months ago, I would have been like, fuck this, I'm out. Don't see me. Like, but
How dare you say nice things about me, Cab?
well, I don't mind people saying nice things about me. I care about them saying nice things about me publicly. You know, that's the trick there. But yeah, that's my answer to the question: is being comfortable with receiving financial support from people, literally anybody, and letting people talk about me publicly at all, really, but positively.
Yeah, and I can very much understand that mindset, and it's certainly one that a good number of people that I know have. Just that you want to feel like you are creating something from your own effort, and you don't want to feel like you are clout chasing or that you have gotten success on someone else's coattails, and that type of self-awareness and humility is very good and healthy. But also at the same time, like I said, balance is everything. That the strict disallowance also at a point can do yourself a disservice. And I'm glad that you have become more comfortable allowing things like that. And certainly, I was fortunate enough to have Cabal. I was looking back on episode numbers recently, and he was episode 30. Like I mentioned earlier, this is episode 90. And I also can say, Cabal and I do not talk with a intense amount of regularity, but we have known each other in a acquaintance level sense since he was much, much, much smaller than he is now. And it's been one of those things that I've had guests who were very, very small when I had them on the show, and fast forward a year and a half now that they are very, very big. And I'm over the moon happy for them. And at the same time, I've been very comfortable in reaching out to folks that are much bigger than me. One, because, well, at least in the beginning, everyone is bigger than you. And that for a show like this, I had to reach out to people bigger than me. It was literally, that is statistically, numerically, the only thing to do. But also being very aware that as someone who is a talk show host and has designed their brand, their channel around this type of content, that I need to be very aware and sensitive and thoughtful about not the combination of not being perceived as someone who is clout chasing, while also just genuinely not being someone who's clout chasing. Because there are ways that you can not be clout chasing and perhaps accidentally appear to be as such, and there are ways that you cannot appear to be as such while still being clout chasing, not doing good things. And that is my dance of the tasteful line of it all. And I like to believe I have towed that line very effectively, and that I like to think at least is partially because I have a background that is a lot in professionalism and dealing with other people. So I have a lot of experience in understanding that this isn't something that I just fell into and, I happen to have a bit of a knack for it, perhaps, but that I was relatively confident in my ability to do this type of content and be able to toe that line. And I guess the affirmation that I get is that, at least as far as I know, my name in the community is neutral, if not good. Because I certainly do know that if it is a small world and a smaller subgenre and a smaller community, and if you're an ass, word will spread very quickly.
Oh yeah.
But that's sort of the balance and the awareness that I have to have of accepting that I am going to have to ask folks for favors, in the sense of time. That just time is one of the most precious things that we have. That, like you said, trying to not get theological, but at the end of your days, whether you consider to be this set of days for you or otherwise, that you want to be able to look back and say that you did all right, and that giving someone time. You being here on this show, taking time out to talk to me earlier this week, that is you giving a precious resource to me, who, prior to this, we have not had a significant interaction, and that my guests very much understand that they're not likely to get much of financial return, if any, either. That this is time that you could be on your channel, getting money from bits, subs, what have you. It's time that you could be just relaxing, and that you are generous enough to spend it with me is a huge deal. And I need to, it is my duty, frankly, to understand that and appreciate that. And at the same time, I do need to sort of go in that, on that limb and do what some folks are not comfortable with, which is, asking for that favor, for that donation of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
For your own content, is there anything that you're looking to really, I suppose, innovate or develop with your own stream, and now having sort of this paradigm shift of it's not as time intensive as it once was, but that you are still going on at this new pace? Is there anything that you're really aiming at in the future?
So as of December 14th, I completed my second year as a content creator.
Ooh, congratulations.
Thank you. And same cheers to you.
Yes, thank you.
So we're going into this new year. I think it's a very common note for people at the end of December going into January is to reflect and to consider and to maybe lay out some plans, or at least some very basic bone structure of plans. And so for me, this next year of content creation, this past year, what I've done is I as I mentioned before, I did the monthly psychology edutainment lectures. I'll be honest, there's 12 months in a year, and I think I did 8, maybe 9. This next year, I want to do one every single month. I want to also, the psychology open house streams where I've been having these relaxed morning talks on like Saturday and Sunday mornings. I want these to become a normal thing in my rotation, where I do them, weekly or bi-weekly or whatever, just like much more commonly. I want that to be a bigger part of my content, and that's my big thing. That's the moving forward. I want to more properly and consistently include psychology in the content that I make, instead of just being a variety streamer.
Mm-hmm. One other sort of unique part of your content is that you sing, and there's a fair number of VTubers that sing. That there's a lot of folks, obviously, in sort of the idol J-pop genres of music that is going to be a lot more common VTubing, but you enjoy. You use the term shanty a lot.
Yes.
I'm not sure if folk song would also be apropos.
I would say it's just as appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah. That you actually have released an entire album on SoundCloud, which is something that even fewer folks have done. For starters, that album, are these shanties ones that you have written yourself, or ones that you have found along the way, just either, from books or, personal experience, or have you actually written them yourself?
I wish I could claim that I've written any of these. But yeah, I did. This year, for hitting 2,000 followers on Twitch, I debuted an album called Songs of Sky and Mine. It's 12 tracks, and some of them are dwarfy, some of them are proper sea shanties, and then some of them are just songs that really mean a lot to me. For example, the first song on the album is The Greatest Adventure, which is a song from the 1970s Hobbit movie by Rankin Bass. And like that movie is really, really important to me, and that song is the big, well-known song for that movie. So I love the lyrics. It's short, it's sweet, it's very pretty, and it's just I made the album because I do like to sing. I like to sing a lot. I've loved to sing for years and years and years. And I published this in October, middle of October, and it was a really cool experience, but I do not. I told myself I was going to write a song for the album, and I got COVID. And so like I just was not in the fit state of mind and body to even approach something that I had never done, but was also just, I'm sure, to no small extent intimidated by the prospect and never actually made any efforts to do so. But like a lot of these songs are from a Canadian folk singer named Stan Rogers, one of my favorite musicians of all time. A lot of the Longest Johns, which is a younger group of guys that are very, very well, very, very good songwriters and singers themselves. A couple of them are also from another folk group called Schooner Fair. Just really a wonderful series of songs that all are pretty important to me. And I've already promised that I'll do another album sometime in the future, and hopefully won't be half hacking up a lung due to COVID symptoms when I record the thing. So hopefully it'll sound a lot better and maybe even have some proper audio mixing, and depending upon the level of production quality that I can put into it.
Was that album something that you knew really early on in your content creation journey that you wanted to do, or was that something that perhaps a couple months in that you realized, oh wait, I do enjoy singing, this is something that I can add to my content creation portfolio, so to speak?
Humorously enough, like I said, I've always liked to sing, and I've always, I for a very long time have had a good understanding of voice acting and the importance of training your voice and warming your voice up before you go live to record something. So a lot of people, like, they do bars, they do the V500 or whatever it is. I'm not so classical, and I think that one of the easiest ways to wake my voice up before I'm going to go put it to work for hours at a time, which streaming absolutely can be, is sing. I think that singing is a really effective manner, especially considering the vibrato and baritone songs that I tend to sing. Really lends to waking my voice up and getting it nice and warm for production. And so what I found myself doing is I would sing one or two songs before I went live. And then I said, well, I think I'm pretty good at singing. I could definitely do this. And then I started in my going live screen, I would leave my mic hot and I would just let my songs that I was using to warm up with be the background track for my going live soon screen.
I don't know if I've ever heard of someone doing that before. That I've heard of plenty of folks, they will play their recordings of their music as their going live screen.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever heard of someone doing live singing for a non-singing stream as part of the going live experience.
Yeah, and I think that's what's nice about that is it also gives the people who are like intimately familiar with the schedule, it gives them a little bit of an extra reward, if you will,
for showing up, for being there early. Yeah.
Because I have people in my community who I guarantee you will show up just so they can hear the first couple of songs of the day, and then they'll go and lurk for a little while, until they can actually sit down and dedicate time. But they wanted to cut out a few minutes, 5-6 minutes to come by and listen to a couple of songs before they can come back to the stream properly later. And that means a ton to me.
Yeah, and that also gives folks who aren't able to catch it a bit of extra incentive, perhaps, to check out the VOD of, all right, here's something that usually, if you're going to bring up a Twitch VOD, you're going to quickly, scrub through and see, all right, where do we have the end of the going live screen? Where do they actually appear? But this now gives them the cause to not only see the VOD if they miss those opening minutes, but to actually watch and enjoy those opening minutes.
Yeah, when does the content start? It starts when I hit play. Yeah, no, absolutely. And all of those things sort of blend into each other to be a reasonable method. But definitely when I started, it was just like, oh, well, shit, I'm doing it already. Like, may as well just share it with everybody.
Why not? Hey, that honestly, that takes a lot of confidence, because not just the mere act of being comfortable singing on stream, which already takes a base level of confidence, but the whole concept of warming up is that you are not quite at your best yet, that you are shaking off the rust, and that you are more likely to have some vocal hiccups and just not be as smooth and good sounding, because that's what a warm up is for. So being comfortable with others, watching, listening, your warm up is a whole nother level of comfort, and like, good on you, man.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you. It's very kind of you to say. But what's humorous about it is that that's also become sort of a mini game to members of my community. Well, they'll come in and they'll press a sound alert button to see if it's working.
To try and trip you up in that way, because you still because
Exactly.
that's a whole other thing, because you don't. I forget. Is it possible to disable sound alerts by scene? Think it is.
Probably.
I'm not sure.
I have no idea.
It's
entirely possible.
I hadn't even thought of that particular aspect of just, the natural, all right, teehee, we're going to mess with streamer type of thing, and that brings it to a whole new game level.
Well, it's also with that, like, so the Greatest Adventure, like I mentioned before, is a really important song to me. It's the first song on the album, blah blah blah. But also, I sing the first verse of it whenever I get rated.
Yes, I do remember that you did sing yesterday, and that because I didn't realize until yesterday that you had actually published a full album. I knew you did shanties, but obviously, one of the things I do while prepping to have someone on my show is make sure that I'm, doing the basic search beyond my usual level of familiarity to see, all right, is there anything obvious that I've missed? And I realized that I had missed that album because not everybody has a Bandcamp link on their Twitch page.
Right.
And so I knew that you sang, but didn't know that you had the album. And like you said, it is that first one there. And I immediately recognized it when I hit play because you had been rated earlier in that stream.
Yeah. And so what happened to me, I think it was actually coming somewhat recently for the first time, where I was still in that, like, warming up, singing songs to, like, get myself together. But, like, it's pretty common if I, like, fuck up the lyrics or whatever, and I, like, stumble or whatever, I'll go, you know what, next song, we'll do it, hold on. Like, so, like, really being very open and vulnerable with that trip up. But I'm in the middle of a song, and I have my headphones off, so I can't get bothered with sound alerts this time, and I see I'm getting rated. So, like, I immediately stop singing the song, and I go, and then I just start singing the raid song, because that's the expectation, is that if I get rated, the song starts to play, I sing the song with it. So, like, that was a really, really humorous way to start my stream, is that, I got rated during the starting soon screen, so I had to sort of scramble everything together and go live a couple minutes earlier than I expected.
Yeah, and I love raids as part of the Twitch system. That one, I think, as a viewer, it is a huge feature of being able to, all right, I've been watching someone who I really enjoy, and stream's ending, that's a bit sad, but then being able to be just ushered right into somebody else, and them having sort of that implicit seal of approval from the person that you're already enjoying because you're there and watching their stream, that one, for discovery purposes, and I will very much say as a talk show host, I have been the beneficiary of many, many raids. There have been many folks who would eventually become guests on this very show that I was introduced to because someone who I had on the show previously and was, just tuning into one of their streams, raided into them. And also just, I think it's great what it does for, one streamer to another, of being able to, sort of pass along that love. And, it is a huge compliment to be rated, because that means that someone is saying, I like you, and I think that my fans, my community will enjoy you, and that I trust you to be the next person that they see.
I completely agree.
Speaking of past guests, Tia, welcome on in. Good to see you. It's been a while. And Tia was, goodness, I forget. I feel like that episode was in the teens or early 20s. That's one of the very fun things for me as a host now. Like I said, sort of going on 2 years and being able to realize, wow, I guess I have done this a fair bit now. You mentioned the greatest journey or greatest adventure for the first song name.
Yes, the greatest adventure.
Greatest adventure. Yeah, that it is in The Hobbit, and that Tolkien as a whole, perhaps unsurprisingly as a dwarf VTuber, is just a author and a world of great interest and passion for you.
Yep.
And you actually mentioned that you are sort of perpetually reading the Silmarillion.
Yes. If we're going to get into the Silmarillion, let me take a quick bio real quick.
Please go right ahead.
I certainly have a lot to say on that, and
Oh boy.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure thing. All right. Well, while Horatius is standing aside for just a moment, again, thank you all so much for tuning in. Actually, you know what? Let me okay, and it's 4 Qs. I'll make sure that doesn't trip me out. There we go. Yeah. Shout out for you, Tia. Yeah, 10s or 20s. It has been a while. I do remember that for Tia's show, we had a very unique technical issue that day where for some reason it was something with how she was capturing her model that the lighting, the coloring would gradually get brighter and brighter. And she had her outfit was primarily black. And that basically over the course of 10 minutes or so, just shade by shade, get brighter and brighter until it was just totally washed out. And we couldn't figure out for the life of us what was going on there. Oh, yes. And it kept getting freezing too. And it was just sort of, all right, Tia, your color palette's gotten way too bright, refresh. And fortunately, with a simple flicker, she was able to reset the coloring, but that's one of those more unique things because I can't say that it's ever happened where I've had that coloration issue happen. Good to see you as always, Tia, and for folks who have been here or just tuning in, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Jay. This is VTuber Talk episode 90. I was saying, weird to think it's been that long. I do these shows approximately once a week. I try to be super flexible for my guests, so I can't promise regularity in terms of day of the week, time of day. But if you're interested, you can follow it here on Twitch or on Twitter. It's just VTuber Talk in both places. And even if you're not following me, be sure to follow Horatius. Let me get him another shout out. Gosh, I have to say, I'm so excited. The new computer, knock on wood, is working exactly as I'd hoped. There's just little things that, even typing shout outs in the doc in chat on my laptop would have a noticeable lag. And that I could tell my machine was chugging because it was not designed to stream and do a lot of heavy duty stuff. But I'm able to do this just super easily now. And I'm very excited for the things we'll be able to do on this new machine, whether it be streaming with just that little bit more of fluidity or, even being able to play games. And Dancing Corpse, thank you so much for the follow. It's a fun name, Dancing Corpse. And Forest Hammer, yeah, you've been around. Thank you as well for the follow. That mentioned it sort of in passing earlier that I do have a charity marathon that's going to be coming up. It's going to be the 14th and 15th of January for my second anniversary. That's going to be benefiting Child's Play Charity. It's a fantastic group out of Seattle, Washington, but they have worldwide impact serving children's hospitals and domestic violence shelters all around the world. They do great work. Definitely recommend checking them out if you haven't already. But we were able to raise $4,000, which just blew my mind last year. That the goal was $1,000. I was hopeful that we could get there, wasn't sure. And we raised just like I said, incredible $4,000, hoping to raise more this year. And even if it's not $4,000 again, that any amount of charity is a good amount for charity. So you will definitely be seeing some posts from me on Twitter in the coming weeks about that. I invite all my previous guests back. And last year, I think I had 29 guests in total come back. And we'll see how things line up this year. Oh. Happy to hear. No, Tia, you didn't apply that. That was just a informational thing that you were in. Anyone who's a past guest is invited. Horatius is going to be invited. We'll see how schedules line up. But like I said, that's going to be January 14th and 15th. And I do see some movement from you, Horatius. So welcome on back.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries, man. Bio breaks are necessary things. But yes, absolutely. The Silmarillion. And you told me that when you finish reading it, you restart again because you have just found that there is always stuff to discover in that book and in that world.
A big part of that is I genuinely struggle with memorization of proper names. So even as we discuss the Silmarillion now, I'm going to be like, oh, the guy who builds the boat. Instead of Faerun or Faerun or whatever, because there's just literally dozens and dozens and dozens of names. And I can't afford the brain real estate to remember them all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tolkien obviously very much known for his detailed, deep world building, and that, when you have so many names, so many pieces of information being thrown out, some of them just being mentioned once in passing, sort of almost an extra brush stroke, it feels like, in the writing, and that it's not going to be something super impactful for the narrative at large, that this isn't some mystery novel where you need to pay super close attention, because if you miss something, then it's going to come into play down the line. That there are, I don't want to say throwaway lines, but there's a lot of just sort of flavorful additions that don't need to necessarily be retained, but when you get to the point that you're able to allow that mental bandwidth to it because you are more familiar with other things, that I have to imagine it really does just flesh out the experience and make each subsequent reading all the more fulfilling.
Agreed. And it's one of those things where Tolkien is the kind of writer that if he brings up Luminor, the third son of Feanor, the fifth son of blah, like, if he brings this character up and it is just like a momentary aside, if this character is important later, he will reintroduce the character. Like, it's not just gonna be like, and then this person, you know him, like,
yeah, he's very accommodating to the reader.
Yes. Despite the fact that the Silmarillion reads like walking through syrup, because it's a textbook. It's basically the world building textbook for Middle Earth.
Yeah, I've not actually read the Silmarillion myself, but obviously, just in terms of fantasy writing, it is difficult to think of something more prolific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really important. I'm a big fan of it.
Is there any particular piece of that world that, I guess, obviously dwarves probably had a pretty big impact on you, but was... Actually, no, I'll rewind that question a little bit. What was your introduction to the Silmarillion?
I'm going to go back a step further
Okay.
to answer that question. When I was very young, a mere beardling, The Hobbit was read to me as a bedtime story over the course of a week or two. Because The Hobbit itself is a pretty short work.
Yeah.
Literally written by Tolkien so that one of his works could be enjoyed by his children.
Yeah, it was actually designed as a children's story. And yes, it is a relatively lengthy children's story, but
sure,
the original text is a relatively consumable thing. That it's one that I had as assigned reading in 7th grade.
Yeah.
It's one that, for the recent trilogy of movies, did not inherently need to be a trilogy. It was cool that they were able to make it one, but
Sure.
the Battle of 5 Armies is not actually a big part of that book. It's like a page or two, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, the Battle of Helm's Deep, which was about a third of a whole movie, is 2 paragraphs. Yeah, the Tolkien does not give a lot of attention to battles because they are important keystone moments for history, yes, but the man survived the Somme. Like, he's like, yeah, war happens, it sucks, let's move on. But yeah, so I was first exposed to Tolkien's works as The Hobbit, as a bedtime story, and I was like, this is it, I'm in. And as I grew in age to be able to read more complicated works and literary appreciation, I found the Lord of the Rings trilogy, read those. It was like, what's next? What else is there? And they were like, here's this obscure book called like Unfinished Stories and et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, cool, gimme. And then I'm like, all right, what's next? And they're like, it's the Silmarillion. And I was like, that sounds really cool. Let's do it. And
What's that word mean?
Exactly. I was like, you mean like the crystal ball from the trilogy? And they're like, yeah, kind of, but a lot more. Because that's what the Silmarillion is. It's a story of the Silmarils. If you're familiar with the Lord of the Rings movies, Saruman the White has like a crystal ball that he sort of ponders on, and that is a Silmaril. That is one of the Silmarils. Basically, reservoirs of incredible magical power that provide borderline unlimited capability to those who have them in their possession. But yeah, basically it's a magical MacGuffin for the sake of the story. And the Silmarillion is a story of all of the Silmarils and where they end up, how they get there, etc., etc. But yeah, I finished it and I was like, I'm sure I missed something. And I went back and I sure did. Like, like I read the words. I absolutely read the words. I know I missed some subtext or some text.
Yeah,
And
it's an interesting almost fugue state that you can wind up in a
Mhm.
book that you're reading that you're really into, that you think, oh well, you're super into it, that means you're gonna really get every detail. And it it almost has the parabola effect where when you are just in the zone, you can just go through it and you read the words and your brain processes them in real time. And then as you get to the next part of the book, you do not fully consciously remember everything you just read, you just know it was awesome.
Mhm.
And that I've had instances when reading books where it was just like, wait a minute, I know I just read that passage, but I need to go back and reread it
Yeah.
because I can sort of detect that I just glossed over it in a way that I read it, but I at the same time you just short-term memory loss in a way that I don't get in other states, that I realize, wait, I need to reread this, make sure I got that. Um, and then just sort of to the macro effect there of doing that with the book.
Yeah, and um similarly in a structured in that it's a series of stories. Like it's if you just flip to a random chapter or whatever in the Silmarillion, you could read a single story and then be like, oh, that's a cool story, thanks. Um, but one of the things that I find most compelling is that upon rereading is seeing the timeline, seeing how the different stories interweave and how this moment in this story, that's what sets this whole other story into motion. And I don't know, it's
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant.
they aren't entirely unrelated stories is the big
Yeah.
thing of them all.
Mhm.
Is there any particular part of it, any particular story that has always stood out to you as just, that if you were to read one that does it either hold a special place in your heart just because you think it's particularly cool, or maybe one that you feel has bigger impact on the world? Is there a part of it that you can sort of point out?
Yeah, there's the story of the Numenorians, which are a race of humans that are, by as far as you could consider, regular humans. They're just regular ass humans. They look like normal humans, except two things. One, they're like 9 feet tall, and two, they live about 200 to 300 years. Um,
While those sound like very, fundamentally big different things, in actuality, if you were living in a society where everyone is about 9 feet tall, then it's entirely unremarkable. And yes, that
yeah,
is a slightly longer lifespan, but at the same time, in relativity and even in Tolkien relativity, two,
mhm,
300 years is still not that long
yeah,
because, you've got the elves that are going to be here for a couple millennia.
right. A 300-year-old Numenorian is an elder, ancient even, but to an elf, that's still like, oh, so how's your second marriage going? Because I'm sure like, that sort of thing. So it's that's a very interesting story because the Numenorians are an interesting race of people that have a very fascinating encounters with the elves and the different forms of the elves and the Valar um, and how they're met. They're sort of like an island people, like they have like an island kingdom, and then are brought over from the land of Numenor to sort of begin to play their own roles in the stories of the Silmarillion. So it's like, curiously enough, they're just like doing their own shit, and then the elves are like, "Hey, you guys seem pretty cool. You want to like join us and help us out with the stuff that we got to do?" And they're like, "Yeah, shit, why not?" And then they become, accidentally in some ways, on purpose in others, almost borderline antagonists through a lot of the short stories. Are Numenorian characters, so it's always fascinating to see how fantasy races are written, how they're explored, what their narrative roles are. And the Numenorian were one of the first ones that I'd ever seen that are, again, like, on the overall, are just humans, but they're also just so different. So I don't know. That was a really eye-opening moment for me. That sort of taught me the life lesson that people, just because they look the same, can be unbelievably different.
Mm,
And that's a lesson that I've carried my entire existence.
yeah. Um, So, making sure I'm remembering correctly. So the order of reading was Hobbit, Lord of the Rings,
Unfinished Tales.
Unfinished Tales, and then Silmarillion.
Yeah.
At what point in time in that sequence did you see the movies?
Well, I didn't know what The Hobbit was when I saw the movie the first time.
Wait, what?
I didn't know what The Hobbit was when I saw the movie the first time.
Okay,
the old
actually, hold on.
animated.
I need to. All right, that was going to be the question. Which version of the movie? And so the animated one. Okay.
Yeah, the animated one. Again, as a child, because loved it. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. I like this. And they were like, hey, there's a book. This is based off of a book. And I was like, oh yeah. So that's how I got introduced to the book. So
Okay.
Hobbit Rankin Bass movie, Hobbit book, Lord of the Rings books, and then Lord of the Rings movies as they came out.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. All of I had read all of the books. So it was Hobbit, Rankin Bass, Hobbit animated, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings trilogy, Unfinished Tales, Silmarillion, Lord of the Rings movies, Hobbit movies, and then all the other associated works along the way. I forget where in that jumbled mess in the midsection, but oh geez, what is his name? He did Fritz the Cat. You know that?
Fritz the Cat.
Oh gosh. The Cat.
I know who played Big the Cat, but that's a very different cat.
Yeah, Ralph Bakshi. Ralph Bakshi. Known for very raunchy cartoon works. But yeah, he did a version of the Lord of the Rings movie story. Only ever did one movie. It's really good. it's a very compelling story delivered by amazing voice acting performances, and a lot of the movie is rotoscoped, which was like a pioneering technology at that time. I'm gonna send you a link to a YouTube video concerning it, that I think you'll really enjoy the video essay about it. It's by a guy named Folding Ideas. You may have heard of.
That name does ring a bell. Yes. It's always super interesting to find people's experience with Lord of the Rings, since it is one of the more prolific just franchises, whether it be fantasy or otherwise, and that different folks have those different entry points, and that sometimes the order of introduction can sort of be its own narrative for the experience, because like we were talking about earlier, you only get to experience things for the first time once.
Yep.
And especially in such a big winding series, or perhaps not winding but fleshed out series as just the Tolkien universe, as Middle Earth, that being able to get the stories in certain orders makes for a slightly different viewing experience, because it does not necessarily need to be consumed linearly in terms of release or in terms of chronology.
Yeah.
Have you found, just through your own reading, that if you were to recommend a reading order or a consumption order to folks, where you would say to start and then where to go?
I think I'd recommend the order by which I had them. I think if whether you read the books first or you watch the movies first, I don't really care. You're gonna consume media how you're gonna consume media. But I would still say Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and then the rest of the associated works.
And that is what I would argue even today is not the most likely order. That I feel like most of the time folks start with the Lord of the Rings films, and then branch off into any number of directions from there. That I've seen folks go from Lord of the Rings films to the Hobbit book, or then back to the Hobbit animated movie. Some go from the live action Lord of the Rings movies to the live action Hobbit movie. And similar to Pokemon, you have this infinite accessibility that there fortunately is no wrong way to consume that series, even with chronology, which very few series, frankly, are able to do that for most storytelling, and
Mhm.
understandably so, that there is usually going to be a discrete beginning and end point that is designed to be read in order.
Yeah.
And that uh, I I have to assume that even if it wasn't his goal from the outset, that Tolkien's works miraculously, and I have to assume at some point through active effort, wound up being that type of accessible where you can just pick up any book in any order. And while you're going to get more from any given book, once you have read others that are in that world, that none of them are requisite to each other. Well, sorry, I would say, Two Towers and Return of the King are prerequisite or have prerequisites for obvious
Yeah.
reasons. But if you were considering The Lord of the Rings as its
A
own
single.
holistic
Yeah.
installment, that none of them have requirements from the others.
Yeah, and I agree with that because other than The Hobbit and um, Lord of the Rings, like even between those two pieces, there's a relatively massive, like 50 some year time skip between the events of the end of The Hobbit and the beginning of Lord of the Rings. So like the timeline is very big because of how much effort into that Tolkien put into. And so like you'll have situations from other works referenced. Like there's moments in the Lord of the Rings where they go, "I was there in the Battle of Five Armies," and you're like, "Oh man, what's that?" um, but like other than the occasional reference, which could just be chalked up to a reference of history, I completely agree. Like each of those works are not terribly incumbent on you knowing the other source material first. So it's interesting that because the way it was constructed over such a long period of time, not just in canon but also in reality, that you can just sort of pick and choose a dropping point. And so I suppose, revisit my answer and say, if you want a light, fun read, start with The Hobbit. If you want a more serious, thorough read, go with The Lord of the Rings. If you want a bunch of short stories, do The Unfinished Tales. And if you want to read a textbook or read, a more formal work about the history of a land, read the Silmarillion first. So at that point, it becomes, what's your favorite genre of book?
Mm, yeah, I feel like the one general uh, the one general consensus in terms of like line of thing is that I found very few that say read the Silmarillion first. That usually Silmarillion is either last or just at the very least not first. That it, like you said, it can be, and
Yeah.
that it is perfectly accessible in that sense. But because it is so dense
Mhm.
and that it is so just it's not a conventional story, so to speak, that you, like you
Mhm.
said, have these different tales within it, that it usually functions better as additional material rather than starting material. But at the same time, you can just start there, and that's okay.
Yeah, and because like if you want to go by the canonical timeline of things, you start with the Silmarillion,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
the Silmarillion literally begins with the god of creation singing the world into existence. So there is no before then,
Mhm.
but yeah, I feel like you can do whatever you want with that, which is nice.
Yeah. I'm now looking at the time. We've been here 2 hours, 40 minutes. We're almost at the 3 hour mark. I told you when we were talking earlier, we were like, things can end up usually maybe about 2.5 hours.
Mhm.
Like we've gone deep in a lot of different topics. And
Mhm.
there's a couple things that I meant to ask that we just never got around to that I wanted to ask about some of your camping, because you mentioned in passing that you really enjoy camping. I was going to
Mhm.
ask if there were any tales there. You mentioned there that you have this appreciation and uh, set of skills in craftsmanship,
Mhm.
which is super unique, which I didn't get to. And I don't think we're going to have the time today, but if you're able to, I mentioned this earlier that you are definitely invited to my second anniversary charity marathon, and that's where I get to, catch up with a lot of guests who might not have been on the show for a while, and
Yeah.
maybe introduce some to others. But it also gives me a chance to sort of sweep up different pieces and stories from folks that we didn't get to talk about when we were, doing our one-on-one show, and that time allowing, I'd love to be able to bring that up then. But even if not, hey, folks, if you're curious, be sure to ask Horatius about craftsmanship and camping in some of his Just Chatting streams, because you do a good number of Just Chatting streams, and I'm sure that if folks want to get those stories, if they don't already know those, that there's a couple of threads for you to start some things with. So, as always, definitely be sure to follow Horatius. His links are here at the bottom of the screen. For any of you watching on YouTube, hi YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. That you'll have links in the video description. I'm going to shout out one more time here. But before we end, I have 2 questions that I always ask all my guests.
Sure.
And the first one, we've touched on in a couple of ways, so there may be some repeat, but with the end of 2022 in sight, that we are, less than 2 weeks away now from 2023, do you have any goals for next year? That you already mentioned that you hope to write a song and that you hope to have your mental health show be a monthly thing. Is there anything else that you're really hoping to accomplish, whether it be in terms of metrics or just projects?
I want to take my wife somewhere nice, which I know is not necessarily the answer you expected to hear, but certainly a valid one, I think. I want to take Willow somewhere. I want to make a big memory with Willow this year. The life has been a bit tumultuous the past couple of years for her and I, and things for the first time in a long time are getting quite stable. And with that, I kind of want to take her on a cruise or go travel somewhere or just rent a cabin somewhere and just spend a weekend with her and nobody else. There's a drive to make a very big memory with her and I this year in my heart, and that's something that I would really like to see done this year.
That's super sweet. And I can definitely say that you're not the first guest I've had that has, openly been in a relationship, openly been married. I think that is the first time that someone's goals, because sometimes I say, what's your goals for this year, if it's early, midpoint of the year, and then shift it to for next year when we get to this time. I think you might be the first to specifically have the goal of that type of trip. And I think that's a really admirable goal, because I did not limit it to as a streamer, that obviously there's going to be the more likely tint and focus in that direction. But it's really cool that that is something that's really important to you. And like we discussed earlier, you already have several other streaming related goals. So I'm glad that you were able to have those different things both in and out of content creation that you are being mindful of and looking forward to do next year. That I know for me, I don't even quite know quite yet that Vtuber Talk, like I said, is designed sort of to be a perpetual iteration, and my iterations are small and not frequent, and that for me, just continuing along, and obviously in the early parts of the next year doing the charity marathon. But I always love hearing what different folks with different styles of content creation have in mind, because like I said earlier, there is no necessarily one right way to do content creation, and I'm so happy that you have found that healthy balance for you, and that you have found something that you are not only comfortable with, but obviously having a lot of fun with. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you do in 2023, both in terms of content creation and, whatever bits and pieces that you are comfortable sharing. That I know some folks like posting vacation pictures, others do not. And that's fine, but I definitely am excited for 2023 for you.
Thank you.
And the last question that I ask all my guests is, what does being a VTuber mean to you? And that is not the question of what does it mean to be a VTuber, or what is that definition, but different people get different things from being a VTuber. I've had certain folks say it lets me get in touch with my inner child, or it lets me be someone that I can't be in real life. Others have had a more perhaps clinical approach of it is a toolbox for me as a content creator that I don't get as a facecam streamer. It is a mask that I wear. It is a role that I get to play because I love acting. And those are very different answers, and everything in between beyond is totally legitimate. So for you, Horatius, what does being a VTuber mean to you?
I'm going to give you a pre-canned answer from a couple of my friends that I've heard it worded this way, and I think it's really, really pretty. I have a lot of friends in the VTubing community that are trans, and this is the answer that I get from them when when I hear them answer this or a similar question. Um, VTubing lets me be perceived the way I wish I was.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because I know that you have several friends who have been past guests of mine, and I've heard variations at the very least of that answer. I admittedly cannot remember off the top of my head if I've heard that exact line. I don't know who you got it from, but I think it's a very good line, and it's a very understandable one. I guess for you, is there any particular aspect of VTubing and how you present yourself, of how you enjoy being perceived?
I don't have to wear pants.
A very fair answer.
I mean, yeah, like I don't have to consider my fashion while on screen and while performing and while broadcasting, which is really nice. Because I'm a really slob person when it comes to my fashion. I'll wear sweatpants and graphic tees until I die if I can. But yeah, just not having to put on a physical show on my own actual body, and because I sort of schlep that job onto the model.
Yeah,
that's really nice.
I always ask that question at the end of the show, one, because I think it helps sort of tie a nice bow on things, but also because after talking with someone for a couple hours, while I never know how someone will answer, the answers make sense. And just from the different things that we have discussed today, that it is clear that for you, VTubing at large is something, it started out as a combination sort of hobby and, all right, can we make this work in a professional sense, because you were between jobs at the time. But then you got your current position, and it is obviously a vocation that you are still passionate about, still enjoy, and you realize, all right, we're gonna have to scale back a little bit here, because you still want to make VTubing and content creation work while having it not be that 9 to 5, that full-time job, and that you have been able to find that balance, and that the venue, the avenue of VTubing as your choice as a content creator, especially as someone who is in the mental health space, is it's a very cool choice, because you, of all people, are probably going to be that little bit more aware of your options and a little bit more thoughtful of, all right, that you can be more deliberate in that choice, and that the choice of VTubing, I think, makes a lot of sense, because, like you said, it lets you present yourself however you want to be, that it allows you to have that extra sense of combination of creativity, but just comfort, frankly, that other forms of content creation and streaming don't really have with them. And it's one of the best perks, frankly, of VTubing, and why I think it has become so very popular, and why it will continue to be popular down the line. And I also think that it's going to be interesting to see, from a mental health standpoint, that while obviously there's a lot of negative mental health things that can happen with being a content creator, that a lot of actively healthy things can come from VTubing that are not offered by other content creation forms, because of the exact reason that you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a a budding sub genre of study in psychology, is the content creator, the streamer person. Because, like, we've always had, well, not always, but for a very long time, we've had people like this, right? We've had celebrities, we've had talk show hosts, we've had people who are public figures, despite they're a public figure because of the media that they produce. We've had that for a long time. So that sort of specific kind of mental health has been around for a while now, but with how the population of that community has bloomed, the need for more focused clinical approaches for that has blossomed as well. I'm really also fascinated to see how those things turn around, and if maybe even down the line when I'm practicing clinically in the field, if I go, well, I was a content creator for however many years, and therefore I have a lot of insight to the particular stressors and blah blah blah, and like that becomes something that I could put on my resume as like a specialist therapist.
Oh yeah, there's already a very small but growing sub-industry of not just VTuber but content creator consultants from a professional standpoint, but also I don't think I've ever heard of specifically a content creation therapist, so to speak, but it is something that I know is obviously an active discussion in mental health circles. And I very much anticipate that you're going to get folks who just that they market themselves, they brand themselves as a specialist in that space. And I'm sure there are already a handful, but I expect it to become much more common over the coming years and decade because it's just such a big thing. And that this industry as a whole, whether it be VTubing or other content creation, that, like you said, has this very significant amount of unique stressors that a lot of therapists and mental health professionals right now aren't fully prepared for, and that if you are someone who has actively been in that space, that you're going to be even more prepared than a academically prepared professional would be.
Yeah.
Well, this has been just so much fun, man. Again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here. It's been a ton of fun. I know that you have a lot of other streams planned this week, that you posted a really packed schedule and you were streaming even earlier today. So I hope you make sure to, get rest, rest your voice, drink some fluids, stay healthy as always. Do you have anyone that you'd like us to raid?
Let's see. Because the answer is yes. I'm sure I do.
And while Horatius is looking around for a raid target, thank you again to everybody in chat for tuning in. By the way, Lark, hello, good to see you there. I was able to get you a shout out earlier. And once again, to anyone who's been tuning in for any amount of time, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for supporting me, for supporting Horatius. If you are interested in more shows like this, you can follow me here on Twitch, on Twitter, subscribe on YouTube. That all my show VODs go up usually about a week afterwards. So if you saw any of this and want to get back to it after the Twitch VOD has expired, you will be able to go to YouTube and check it out. And if you're on YouTube already, hi there. Thanks for making it to the end of the show. And I'm going to give Horatius one last shout out. Yay,
Yeah,
there we go.
There we go. King the Dwarf _
Ah, okay. I'll admit I've not seen King's stuff yet. So, like I said, raids are always fun for me as host because I get to find new people. So, we will be raiding into King the Dwarf. Be sure to let him know that Horatius sent you. Again, Horatius, thank you so much for your time. This has been a blast. Thank you to everyone in chat. I'm Jay. This has been Vtuber Talk, episode 90. Thank you all so much for being here. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.